Many of you already know that the TYT Army has been officially organizing for the past year. They're making decisions on which candidates and elected officials to help.
Hey everybody, welcome to Staying Home, your revolutionary guide to the Green New Deal. I'm Josh Fox. Today, my guest will be David Sirota. David Sirota, journalist, activist, part of the Bernie campaign, a man with a lot of insights politically about what has been going on in 2016 in the presidential race, and also a staunch critic of the establishment Democrats. And I think one of the things that we are all as progressives right now, and I'm assuming that most of the people who watch this program are progressives. If you're not a progressive, then become one. Are wondering right now is sort of what do we do, right? This is a moment where our hopes have been really not just dashed, but trampled upon and crucified and set on fire and thrown in the river. We have no candidate right now. Bernie Sanders was our candidate. Elizabeth Warren may have been one of our candidates to some people. There were certainly progressive aspects of many different campaigns, and none of whom are on the ticket right now. As well, Ruth Bader Ginsburg has died, which is extraordinarily painful and difficult. And, at the same time, we face utter fascism with Donald Trump. Joe Biden is doing the thing that all of the Democrats have done throughout my entire life when they've gotten to this stage of the presidential race, which is they're punching left. Punch the hippie, punch the environmentalist, punch left, whatever you want to call it. They are gravitating towards the center where they believe votes are. Of course, that strategy has failed quite a bit. It failed with Al Gore. It failed, obviously, with Hillary Clinton. And, Biden's ahead. I'm cautiously optimistic, but we are seeing that moment of the true left, the real progressives, being alienated from the political process in ways that are really, really difficult to deal with. And to be honest, there's a huge amount of fighting about this predicament. And so many people are weighing in and screaming at each other on Twitter, online, on television, in people's living rooms. It's a constant battle. So what David Sirota has written, who is, again, a staunch critic of the establishment left, he's written a piece, which I find really amazing, on his new website, TMI. I guess that stands for Too Much Information, which is cool. And you can subscribe to that. It's on Substack. And David has written a piece called The Toxic Slime Will End Us. And I want to talk to him about what that piece is and what his opinions are. And so this is going to be a wide-ranging conversation about many different issues. David has been a very, very strong voice against fracking and on climate change. And so we're going to talk about these things. But I think so many progressives are in this position, right? They don't want Donald Trump, but have no enthusiasm for Joe Biden. And enthusiasm, as we know, wins presidential elections. What are we going to do? I have my opinions. David has his. We're going to have this out at the moment. We're going to have this out. We're going to talk about it on today's program. Stay with us. Here he comes, David Sirota. David, I think we first met on the front lines of the anti-fracking battles out there in Colorado. And I was a follower of your reporting, and I was really happy to see that you became this part of the Bernie campaign, or maybe we met at the People's Summit, something like that. But we had been in those same circles. Yeah. And I feel that what I want to frame this discussion in, just to start it off, is your piece about toxic slime. It is rare that Ghostbusters 2 is relevant to any conversation, ever, at all. It is rare that Dan Aykroyd is relevant to any conversation in any way, shape, or form. But you've managed to put something together which I think is extraordinary. And I think that we need to talk about what progressives must do right now. And it's so hard to do because it's such a heartbreaking moment. And it's such a difficult moment. And your piece, The Toxic Slime Will End Us, in TMI, which is your new Substack, right, subscriber-based, whatever you call it these days, right, blog, newsletter. Yeah, I think this frames the debate so perfectly. Talk a little bit about your process of political grief and what has brought you to this moment right now.
Well, look, I mean, I worked for Bernie Sanders. I put in, I worked for Bernie Sanders, look, back in, 1999, 2000, and 2001 during the Bush administration. I've been in this battle for, 20 years. I mean, my hair's gone gray. I spent the last year and a half, working for Bernie as a speechwriter on the campaign, doing rapid response. So I know Joe Biden's record really well. And I covered it, by the way, as an investigative reporter. I know the ugly parts of Joe Biden's record, and I make no apologies for them. In fact, they are indefensible. I mean, we could go through it. I'm sure you've gone through it. His support for the Iraq War, bank deregulation, the bankruptcy bill, the fracking, making it harder for fracking, making it harder for people to pay off their student loans. I mean, the list goes on, and it's not a great record. I mean, but I will say it is basically a standard corporate Democratic record. It's not like, it's also not anomalously terrible when taken into the whole scope of the Democratic Party. That's not to excuse it. It's just to say it's not anomalous. And so all that's to say is, like, I understand the critique of Joe Biden. I've outlived that critique for certainly the last year and a half. And yet, when you look at this election, I think, and I want to be also clear, I'm not into vote shaming. I don't think telling people you have to do this, you have to do that, you're terrible for making a difference.
I want to talk about vote shaming in a second, but go ahead. Yeah.
But my point is, the way I've basically decided on how to think about the vote for myself is that Donald Trump is both an extreme version of a standard Republican politician, and then he has one thing that really does set him apart from all other presidents. I think that people exaggerate the anomalous nature of Trump's policies and mistake it for the thing that actually makes him anomalous. And by that I mean his policies on tax cuts, on climate change, fracking, on all sorts of economic issues. These are extrapolations and extreme cartoonish versions of what the Republicans have done, but they're not. They don't really deviate from that Republican standard set of policies. So anyone who's, oh my God, Donald Trump is such an extreme, Republican and has such extreme policies, you're like, where were you during the Bush administration? Like,
No kidding.
Right. So, but I do think where Donald Trump is different than other presidents of both parties in the modern era is that Donald Trump wakes up every day trying to sow chaos, trying to make people feel anxious, trying to divide people, trying to make people feel angry, trying to make people to sow a sense of instability. And the problem with that is that, there are two kinds of things you do as president. One, you manage the government and put forward policy. Donald Trump's obviously terrible at that, but again, he's not
well, that's not necessarily a bad thing.
Right. Well,
he's not a good thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's good that he's not smarter in doing the evil that he wants to do, sure.
Right.
But the other half of the presidency is basically starring in the world's biggest TV show. And this is the first time that I can remember, certainly in my lifetime, but I think really in modern history, where a president has used that platform and that power and that second part of the job to try to tell Americans that actually everything isn't going to be okay, that you should feel anxious, you should feel scared, you should feel angry, you should have hate in your heart for others. And that what ends up happening with that is you can't repeal that like you can repeal a policy, right? You can repeal a bill and you can repeal this rule and that. It's very hard to repeal what I call the toxic slime. And that's what Ghostbusters 2 was about, right? I mean, Ghostbusters 2, the premise was there was so much anger and hate in New York City that it had actually created a psychoactive slime that was basically creating mayhem all across the city.
And that's which gave birth to Rudy Giuliani.
Right. And that's what's gone on, I think, in the United States with Donald Trump, which is that if you look at hate crimes, if you look at people's feelings on racial animus, if you look at all sorts of metrics, that Donald Trump as a psychological agent, a chaos agent, has created a set of problems that make all the other problems that much worse, that much harder to deal with.
You have data to back this up. I mean, you have in your piece, which I think is an extraordinary piece, because it's the perfect mix of total sorrow in a way, and also just somehow lifting back up out of the ooze and saying we have to be Bill Murray at this moment and destroy the toxic slime, which is our first priority. I have to say, you're tuned in to Staying Home, your revolutionary guide to the Green New Deal. This is Josh Fox, and we'll be right back. You're tuned in to Staying Home, your revolutionary guide to the Green New Deal. I'm Josh Fox. My guest is David Sirota. David, so when you're talking about this mood slime, I was reminded of a very, very brilliant man who happened to be my high school history teacher named Joel Dorfler. Joel Dorfler spoke about the presidency, not just as a bully pulpit, not just as a way of creating a regime and laws and all these things, but also as the dictator of the national mood. And I find that so clear. If you think about the national mood during Obama, which was clearly for progressives hugely problematic on so many fronts, but mood-wise, you could still go out to eat and you could still think, and you weren't like having nightmares. Donald Trump's national mood is one of constant fear, constant anxiety, constant provocation, and constant feeling like you're covered in this sort of toxic slime.
Right. He is inciting. That is what he is doing. But I think there's an important point here, which is to say, I also don't subscribe to the idea that we necessarily want a president who's always basically a sedative or always basically anesthesia, right? I mean, we actually need a president who is constantly reminding us of important truths and important fights that we need to be having when it comes to climate change, economic inequality, all sorts of things. So I don't think pining for like this, the normalcy means,
Mhm.
let's just all go back to sleep. That's all that we need. The point that I'm making is not that Donald Trump is just that he's in our face all the time. It's that he's in our face in order to incite, in order to
Yeah.
make anxious, in order to divide us against each other. And that has created a really serious problem. And I should add, the next president is not just, as I said, not going to be able to just repeal that. I mean, this is,
No.
you want to talk about a legacy of Donald Trump. It is going to take many years to heal. God willing that he loses, it's going to take many, many years to heal those psychological wounds that he has inflamed.
And not just psychological wounds, right? You have data showing hate crimes on the rise. Talk a bit about the data that supports the conclusion the thesis of this piece.
Sure. So one 2016 study from Texas researchers found that counties which hosted a Trump rally saw a 226% increase in hate-motivated incidents. 2017 study, Tufts University, found, quote, exposure to Trump's prejudice statements made people more and more likely to write offensive things, not only about groups that were targeted by Trump, but sometimes about other identity groups as well. 2018 study, Trump's election was associated with a statistically significant surge in reported hate crimes across the United States. Counties that voted for Trump by the widest margins experienced the largest increases. And then on top of all of that, during the pandemic, we've seen a horrifying study that found that 1 in 4 young people have contemplated suicide in the last 30 days. And I don't want to lay that all on Trump. It's been a depressing time with the pandemic, but certainly the mix of his mismanagement of the pandemic and him dividing people all the time, I think has sowed a deep depression.
Right. Well, it's clear, and not just a deep depression, but also this weird hate, kind of hate that once an emotional mark is made on people, it's almost like a kind of trauma. And that trauma has a very, very difficult time healing. We talk about intergenerational trauma. I talk about this all the time because I feel it. I'm a grandson of Holocaust survivors. I know that DNA information is inside of me. I work a lot with Native Americans. We talk about this kind of thing all the time, this history of genocide that gets implanted in a people. And then you see things like the Civil War, right? And these moments where you have, an emotional cause to violence, right? There's economic, but there's this emotional damage. I think that you're right on the money, that this is actually doing emotional damage to people, people of color in America, people who have dealt with genocide in America, and that it is almost a psychosis or like a psychic psyops campaign.
Well, I mean, we know the data, the science tells us that kind of phenomenon can happen. I remember after 9/11, there was a study on what was called secondary PTSD, where there was an actual psychological effect on watching those images of the towers coming down over and over and over again. Now, you look at what comes through your TV and what the political news of the day is, whether it's climate chaos or Trump, lauding violence against journalists, and all of his divisive, hateful rhetoric. I mean, that creates, you're right to use that word, that can create real trauma. And the thing is what I worry about is, like, we're right at the moment now where we need a politics that brings us together to deal with enormous things like the healthcare crisis, like the climate crisis, like the pandemic. And we've got the guy in office who every single opportunity there is to bring people together, he is trying to divide people up and incite anger and hatred. I don't know how we're going to solve that.
Weirdly, it goes beyond that. I mean, I find so there was a couple of insights that I got into this recently, and these are two, and maybe you just want to talk about it. Number one was this idea when he went out to the fires in California and said, you know what, magically, this is just going to get cooler. And it felt to me beyond the normal inciting. It felt to me somehow that this man would just lie in whatever instance possible for whatever reason. And I don't even know what the reason was, just to be a contrarian or something. But it was like, well, people should understand that it's magically going to get cooler. Now, this was not going to reassure anyone on the West Coast. They know the difference, right? But it was this bizarre totally bizarre. I have a theory and I'm a genius. Like drinking bleach will help you that's another one of these, like the complete and total absurdity. But then the insight that I got from looking at these absurdities was then the interview with Bob Woodward, where he said, "Oh my God, Bob, you're never going to believe this thing is totally deadly. It's incredibly contagious." Clearly, he knew the truth.
Mhm.
And then went out and said the opposite. Because I've always thought that the craziness and the psychosis of Donald Trump was that he just didn't know the difference and he didn't care and he watched Fox News all day and ate Big Macs all day until his brain was a pile of mush and then went out and said what he wanted. But this seems to me much more deliberate at this point. What do you think?
I mean, I totally agree. And I think that the problem is, look, presidents have lied for forever, right?
Right.
The issue here is that Trump's lies aren't even well thought out or designed for any kind of, as far as I can tell, any kind of productive end. I mean, he said to Woodward, "Oh, I was trying to downplay things in order to not sow panic." But look, there's a way to tell people what they need to know about a public health crisis without just sort of blanket lying in a way that actually keeps people in the dark. And the thing about that, I'm really glad you bring it up, because what blew my mind about that situation was, everyone forgets back in early February, a lot of people, most people really didn't know the severity and the lethality of the virus. It wasn't really on the radar screen. I know now it's like
We
everyone.
weren't even wearing masks.
Exactly. I mean, we're talking about early February, or
Right.
like people have. Oh, everyone knew about it. No, most people did not know much about that. And the point is that there's a way, in the name of protecting human beings and protecting people, to make some of that information available. And what you end up taking away from that situation is Trump was so focused, I guess, on thinking about himself and, not sowing panic to create a political problem for himself, that the public health question wasn't even really on his mind. And by the way, I would make the same claim, the same assertion about Bob Woodward. Bob Woodward was like, "Oh, this was a political story. I thought it would be important to get out before the election." It's like, dude, are you so ensconced in a bubble of political junkies that you forget that the information he gave you actually had a real-time public health significance? Like, that was a public health story. It wasn't a political story.
Yeah, and that is the way Washington operates. That is the problem with representative government, in my opinion, right? Where you go to Washington and it's a lot of pageantry. It's, as a person who comes from this, I know it very well. It's called theater. And you don't understand the ramifications because you're so wrapped up in your own emotions and delivering your speeches and being your actor and looking good and all that kind of stuff. And if you want to think of who are the most vain people on the planet, it's not actors, it's politicians.
Well,
right?
do you know what you're describing is, there's one word for that. It's a lack of empathy.
Empathy. Yeah. And an inability to have any empathy penetrate that bubble. It's like Frank Zappa said, politics is just Hollywood for ugly people. So but what I'm trying to ask about though here is, you have gone through a list of notable people, right? Like Bernie Sanders, Anita Hill. These people are not sellouts.
Right.
Who are now saying they're going to vote for Joe Biden.
Right.
Talk a little bit about that and the idea of selling out.
Yeah,
it's coming across the airwaves so much.
Yeah, I think there's this idea that if you look at Joe Biden's record, and we can agree that his record is disturbing and bad in many ways, that the obvious moral choice is to cast a vote against Joe Biden. That's one argument. I choose, and I think people like Anita Hill and Naomi Klein and you and many, Noam Chomsky, many people who have been in these battles forever, who clearly have a record of not being, DNC shills or selling out. I think, to summarize, that the moral argument is, in a fundamentally immoral system that puts forward two immoral choices, that the priority must be harm reduction. That the priority must be, when given an immoral choice, it's not to make, I'm casting a vote, I'm acting in a way that's not to make myself feel better or superior, or even to make myself feel consistent on every single issue. It's to first and foremost cast a vote and take political action that reduces the most harm. And to me, I'm not going to enjoy voting for Joe Biden. Like, I'm not psyched about getting my ballot and being like, I'm voting for Joe Biden. Like, I'm so psyched. I feel so good right now. Right? Like, I'm going to feel that way, by the way, voting against Donald Trump. I mean, to be very clear about that. But like, the point is that you don't have to be excited. Okay, your vote counts whether you're excited or not. I think the way to think about these things, and I'm not trying to vote shame. I'm not trying to, like, people, we can disagree on this. Like, people can say, no, my moral belief is I have to vote, the two-party duopoly. I got to vote against it. And, I don't think vote shaming works. But what I would say is the way I think about these things is that I can't make a perfectly moral decision inside of a completely immoral system. So the way I have to think about voting is what will reduce the most harm for society, for myself, for my family, and frankly, for my kids, for like literally my children, my two children. Like, what is the way I can engage right now that reduces the most potential for harm for them?
Let me ask you first. Let me say, you're tuned into Staying Home. I'm Josh Fox. We'll be right back. You're tuned in to Staying Home, your revolutionary guide to the Green New Deal. I'm Josh Fox. My guest is David Sirota, journalist, Bernie campaign senior advisor or speechwriter or something. I don't know the official titles. But David, let me just bring up, you brought up vote shaming twice. Now, as the victim of 1,000 years or 12 years and 1,000 different kinds of campaigns of personal online attacks, right, on Twitter. Me, again, the fossil fuel industry and everyone related to the fossil fuel industry has come out and done their worst against me. Death threats, online character assassination, all the kinds, calling me a liar, making whole feature films against me. It happened, some of which were on Netflix. There is something about this idea of vote shaming, which feels to me very much like the idea of a carbon footprint. In other words, when you are being asked to calculate your carbon footprint, you're taking a huge thing, which is a corporate problem, and you're taking it on yourself. Now, the carbon footprint and your calculating of your personal carbon footprint was something invented by BP. BP and their PR firms, it's one of the most successful transfers of guilt and shame and responsibility from a corporate edifice onto a human person, so successful to do that, right? So they were like, nobody's talking about BP's carbon footprint. Everybody's talking about how many plastic straws you have and how much you fly and whether or not you're driving a Prius, right? That's the real problem with climate change, right? So vote shaming, to me, feels like a similar type of thing thought up in some think tank, and I challenge you as a journalist maybe to look into this, that is like the perfect way to kill a real political argument about strategy. Because I have gone out there and said, look, I don't think the Green Party is a good choice. I don't think the Green Party are good strategists. I think the Green Party doesn't do nothing I've ever seen them do. In fact, they've lied a lot of the time. They've said, well, we only want 5%, and we think that Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump are the same. And then when I get to them in a personal conversation, they say, well, of course they're not the same, but they say that in public. So I say, well, they're lying. And then I'm accused of vote shaming. You're vote shaming. And I'm like, wait a minute. No, I'm not. I'm arguing politics. Politics is about persuading people who to vote for in one basic sense. So this whole concept of vote shaming to me feels like something that was thought up in the Heritage Foundation to support online trolls saying that you can't argue against the Green Party. So I want to just say forensically, what do you think that is? And what is there a difference between vote shaming and just simply saying, because whatever I say, I seem to be accused of by like 1,000 online.
No, I think vote shaming. Look,
does that make sense?
Yes, it does. And I think the way to define vote shaming is you can make a positive argument for your candidate. You can make a negative argument against the opposing candidate. When you start making a negative argument against people making the choice that they've made, or a negative argument for your candidate, I think you end up in vote shaming. And by that, I mean,
shouldn't people feel ashamed of voting for Donald Trump or George W. Bush? I think they should.
Well, I guess that's you mean like an affirmative, actually, I'm literally casting a vote for Donald Trump. I mean, that's a whole
I mean, literally, like everyone around me in the hills of PA where I'm at,
I mean, that's
with their Trump signs in their front yards, who are acknowledging the
Yeah.
fact that Trump is a racist and they don't care, should be ashamed of themselves.
Well, I guess that's hard to dispute. I guess the point I'm trying to make is, you should vote against Donald Trump because he has done X, Y, and Z. That's a negative argument against an opponent.
Right.
You should vote for my candidate because my candidate is for A, B, and C. That's a
Right.
positive argument for your candidate.
Right.
You are a bad person for voting for this candidate. I frankly, whether you can debate the morals of whether that's true or not, I don't think it's particularly effective, right? I mean,
I'm saying, I'm not disagreeing with you there. All I'm saying is that this idea of vote shaming in the vernacular has now become the catch-all to nullify any argument. So for example, like when I brought up the fact that the Green Party were taking Republican money to try to sue the state of Wisconsin to keep them on the ballot, people were like, "You're vote shaming me," and I was like, "No, I'm actually just pointing out."
No. What you're doing is
on
that you're making a negative argument against one of the opponents.
Right.
That to me is not vote shaming. Vote shaming is, how dare you consider voting third party? You're so privileged, and you don't care about the country. That's why you're voting third party. One, not very effective. Two, I actually think people who make that choice don't think about it in those terms.
Right.
I disagree with how they're thinking about their vote. And I would argue to them, listen, here's my case for why you should vote for Joe Biden and vote against Donald Trump in the way that I think. And let me make that affirmative argument to you. But sort of implying that people have, automatically bad or nefarious motives in their votes, I think, it's not effective. Now, could you argue that like some Trump voters are casting votes for Donald Trump just straight up because they're racist? I mean, sure. I think there is
without a doubt
evidence for that Trump, part of his base, is motivated by racism. I mean, we've seen that in polls. I don't think it's particularly effective to go to those folks and say the only reason you're voting for Trump is because you're racist. Come vote for my. I just don't think that's an effective tactic.
Right.
Even though in some cases it may be right.
I guess what I'm trying to address is, to me, one of the manifestations of the toxic slime that you're talking about is also this incredibly toxic atmosphere that's appearing online right now. And that you as a Twitter person, and I'm a Twitter person, Facebook, whatever else, I am feeling the toxic slime coming through some of these kind of emotional arguments. And that then one of the things that's problematic about the Trump era is that people just fight with each other in all sorts of ways, right? I'm seeing people without an ability to have any type of conflict resolution at all. Mm-hmm. Like I've had blips in the road with people that you would say, hey, or call them up later and say, hey, hey, can we talk this out? Like we got this wrong. And then boom, you're done. They're not going to pick up the phone. And I feel that that's part of this toxic slime that you're talking about. And I think that 100%. Has translated into our political discourse. Whereas if like somebody say, oh, David Sirota, oh my God, he's just a sellout and all these things. And that's a part of the toxic slime. So that when we participate in that and don't say, this is politics we're talking about, right? We fall into the slime.
Yeah, and I agree. And I would say this, the folks who want to vote third party, I think they engage in vote shaming too. And I don't think it's good either. This idea that, Anita Hill is a sellout or Noam
right.
Chomsky is a sellout because they make a different moral choice.
Noam Chomsky is like 90 years old
and
has now sold out his entire life.
It's ridiculous. But my point is this. I'm not willing to cast moral aspersions at people who've thought through their vote and think that voting third party is the way. I'm going to try to convince them, but I'm not going to say they're bad people for voting third party. I'm not going to. But the thing that bothers me a little bit is I also don't think those folks can lay claim to being like morally superior to people,
which is the inverse side of the
or
same.
You or me or anybody else who's thought it through and made a different choice. It doesn't mean that
right.
Look, and I want to also stipulate, yes, there's a lot of people who are sellouts to the DNC. Whatever the DNC feeds them, they'll eat. I mean, that's a whole, a lot of MSNBC watchers and the like. I mean, and that's a huge problem in our society.
When was the last time you went on MSNBC?
during the campaign.
Well, you know what I'm trying to say, though, right?
Yeah, totally.
The last time I was invited on MSNBC was the day before I declared as a Bernie surrogate in
Yeah,
April 2016.
totally. I mean, totally. And I look,
So
I
that's
think
true.
I and I get it. Like, I think that's a whole separate discussion of like what MSNBC, cable TV in general, has done to our
Right.
ability really to think about politics. I mean, I think we have a whole problem in this country. I've called it the goldfish culture, which is, we forget our world. We're encouraged to forget our entire world, like a goldfish every 15 minutes. By the way, I know that goldfish don't actually forget their world, but it's sort of using the vernacular there. I think the other part of our discourse encourages us to lobotomize ourselves and just not think, okay, the party gave me this, that's who I'm voting for. I don't even want to think about anything. And anybody raising questions, pressuring anybody, anything like that must be bad. And that's a terrible problem. And you could, by the way, you could see that in the Supreme Court fight, right? This Supreme Court fight that's happening now, it's like, oh, Schumer says that there's nothing that the Democrats can do. That must be true. So anybody pressuring Schumer to, actually stand up and try to use the procedural power of the Senate to try to stop this nomination or even slow it down, you're just sowing division. It's like,
it's
don't
an interest.
yourself.
Yeah, well, I mean, what's interesting about this moment is it is a sort of global call to introspection in the coronavirus, right? I should say, you're tuned in to Staying Home, your revolutionary guide to the Green New Deal. We'll be right back. You're tuned in to Staying Home, your revolutionary guide to the Green New Deal. I'm Josh Fox. My guest is David Sirota. The coronavirus being a global call to introspection, a moment where we've all had to kind of come inside, right? And that this goldfish culture that you mentioned is sort of the anti-introspection, the anti-contemplativeness. And I feel that what's so crazy about this moment is it feels like the coronavirus is over simply because our introspection has been taken away from us by the election. Let's do a moment of just introspectiveness, though, about the Bernie campaign, because I think the forensics on the campaign are important in order for people not to simply have a simplistic attitude. I asked James Zogby the same thing. What do you think, aside from all the things the DNC did and all the ways in which there was pressure falling down on that campaign, there are things that we could have done better. What do you think some of them are?
Well,
just for learning, just for the next phase of our lives.
One, I think, and I wrote a little bit about this after the campaign, which is I think that there is a very insidious culture in the Democratic Party that now says, and this is ahistorical, it's an anomaly based on the past, but it says that intra-party battles, primaries, are bad, that they shouldn't have a rough and tumble, they shouldn't have a harsh back and forth, that's bad for the cause of winning a general election. Empirically, it's false. Again, it's an anomaly from the past. I mean, Democratic presidential primaries used to be genuinely brutal affairs. I mean, the Hillary-Obama battle was brutal. The Kerry-Dean battle was brutal. I mean, intra-party primaries are supposed to be the place where general election candidates get vetted in a very serious way. And the idea that that rough and tumble hurts a general election candidate is just false. This idea has been created, I think, by the powers that be who don't want a rough and tumble debate on the issues. And so the lesson, I think, from this, from when it comes to the Bernie campaign, is that you cannot acquiesce to that culture. And there is tremendous pressure on campaigns and candidaats to acquiesce to that pressure. Oh, don't go after Biden too hard because that,
don't go after Warren too hard.
Don't go after Warren too hard. Warren shouldn't go. I mean, Warren never went after Biden. I mean, that blew my mind. Like, they were, big enemies for a long time. That's how she became famous, was her challenging Biden on the bankruptcy bill. She didn't have much to say about it. And again, I think that's a reflection of that culture. And I think one of the lessons is you have to reject that culture. That culture is bad. It's bad for democracy. It's bad for the Democratic Party. And it's very, very bad for progressive candidates because it comes down hard on the progressive candidates, the anti-establishment candidates who are trying to ask taboo questions of that establishment. And so to me, that's a huge strategic lesson here. I mean, I was extremely frustrated at times on the campaign because I'm like, listen, we have to draw a really serious contrast with Joe Biden. And to be clear, we did it sometimes, but I don't think we did it enough. And I think the next time that there is a primary like this, that the candidate or candidates that represent the progressive movement have to be willing to really truly have it out.
Speaking of primaries, you're calling upon people in New York State possibly to primary Chuck Schumer if he doesn't do everything possible to stop a Supreme Court filling of the seat of RBG, right? So what are those things that he could be doing? And talk a little bit about that new piece that you just came out with.
Well, to be clear, I think Democratic primaries are good. I think Senate incumbents, Democratic Senate incumbents, should face primaries. By the way, especially if Joe Biden wins the presidency in that first year, the more serious primaries there are of incumbents, the more they're not going to want to. The incumbents will not want to break with the party and basically work with Republicans to sell out the bills that Biden is putting on the floor of the Senate. So that's one thing. So it's not. I want to be clear. It's not just Chuck Schumer, but in this situation, Chuck Schumer is a guy who has cut deals to help Donald Trump fast-track judges. Chuck Schumer represents a very, very blue state. Chuck Schumer has certain levels of power to slow things down in that Senate, to grind things to a halt. You don't have to grant unanimous consent. You can enforce rules about committee hearings. There's all sorts of ways to grind that place to a halt. And the way you know that that's true is because we know, I think everyone would stipulate that if the roles were reversed and Mitch McConnell was in the minority in this situation, Mitch McConnell would make it as painful and difficult as possible to get a Democrat to get a Supreme Court nominee through the Senate right now. So that suggests that there is that power there. And so my point is only that if Chuck Schumer knows that he has a serious primary challenge in 2022, or at least the threat of one, somebody really, starting to put a campaign together, that's going to say to Chuck Schumer, you better use all of the power at your disposal, because if you don't, this is going to be a major issue in the campaign. And again, I want to be clear. I think that dynamic is good for everybody on everything. And I had an example of this with Blanche Lincoln. Blanche Lincoln in 2010 was a conservative Democrat, Wall Street friendly and the like. She faced a primary challenge in Arkansas. And all of a sudden, out of the blue, she was putting forward a very, very populist progressive bill to crack down on financial derivatives, the instruments that blew up the financial the financial system and the financial crisis. She didn't do that because she had been some great crusader before her prime. She was like, oh my God, I got a primary at home. I'm getting hammered for being a sellout. I need to actually deliver something for the people. That's democracy. That's the dynamic that we want.
I'll give you another example. We campaigned in the state of New York, just a mile across the river over there, for 5 years for a fracking ban. And Zephyr Teachout comes out and campaigns on a fracking ban in the primary against Andrew Cuomo, right? Wins the majority of counties in New York State. She loses to Cuomo, but she wins the majority of counties in the state. And bam, 3 months later, we got our fracking ban.
That's democracy. That's how it's supposed to work.
Yeah. Well, so I understand what you're saying, because there was a great deal of I think it was trauma. I think it was a Trump-induced trauma that happened because Hillary didn't win, and because there was 2016 was such a disaster, and I was on the inside of so many of these conversations, right? Where we were trying really hard to get a fracking ban passed at the platform level. We had to do all this horse trading, but the rancor was there. And then once we went back out to the Hillary campaign, they appointed Ken Salazar as a transition guy who was an avowed fracking denialist. And they did all sorts of things to signal to us, like having a $650,000 fundraiser with the fracking industry in Colorado. Hillary Clinton, saying, all right, well, we gave you these concessions on the platform, but forget you now. In 2 minutes left, you've been critical of Biden, who is punching left. Talk a little bit about why Biden should not be doing that at this moment.
Right. So today he made a comment in Wisconsin, basically saying, I beat the socialist. I'm not a socialist. I'm paraphrasing here. Yeah. And he was asked a question, what do you say about voters' concerns about socialism? There's plenty of ways to answer that question. You can talk about, Medicare, you're expanding healthcare. You can talk about, how we're going to deal with climate change, how we're going to deal with the pandemic. Clearly, Biden answering that way is an innate reflexive thing for him, that to punch left. And the problem with that is even for people who maybe agree with the politics of it or the ideology of it, which I don't, but the problem with the politics of it is that Biden faces, and we see that in the polls, an enthusiasm gap. And he keeps trying to appeal to a smaller and smaller group of affluent Republicans. And the polls show that it's not working, that Donald Trump has consolidated the Republican Party. So the point is that this is going to be a turnout election. So to my mind, he should be doing everything he can to energize disillusioned, disaffected voters. And when he punches left, essentially punching at the base of the Democratic Party, that doesn't help that cause. I would argue it hurts that cause because there are all sorts of progressive people, progressive groups, activists who have decided to say, listen, we're gonna set aside our dissatisfaction with Joe Biden in the cause of defeating Donald Trump. But there's sort of a Jerry Maguire thing going on here. It's like, help me help you, right? Like, no, you got to help us help you. You have to like go out there and help us go to people that we know, go to grassroots activists and the like to help motivate them and energize them for this cause. So when he kicks the progressives in the face, figuratively speaking, that does the opposite. That actually harms the effort to do what we need to do to defeat Donald Trump.
Could be Medicare for all October surprise, do you think?
I highly doubt it. Highly doubt it.
Well, I'm not going to hold my breath, but let's hope something
Fingers
like that
crossed.
could happen. Yeah. Thanks, David. It's
Thanks,
always
man.
a pleasure to talk to you.
Thanks,
one of the most brilliant analysts of politics. Listen, let's defeat the slime. Go watch Ghostbusters 2 and you'll realize that old slogan, you're soaking in it. You're soaking in it. Let's get it out. Let's get rid of it. Thanks, David, for being with us. We'll see you another time. Okay.
All right.
Bye. You have been tuned in to Staying Home, your revolutionary guide to the Green New Deal. Thanks for being with us. We'll see you tomorrow.
Many of you already know that the TYT Army has been officially organizing for the past year. They're making decisions on which candidates and elected officials to help and always coming up with ways to inform people about progressive policies. Now, we want to give a huge shout out to some special volunteers and highlight accomplishments of our TYT Army. In Michigan, State Leader Tara West and Captain Justine Robinson organized the team's first Beer and Politics. How fun does that sound? Look, they thought of this idea at one of their monthly meetups in order to help connect TYT supporters and grow their team's volunteers. Here's what Tara had to say. Our first Beer and Politics event in Grand Rapids was a success. We had 5 new people show up who are enthusiastic about TYT. They all found out about our event through our text bank and they liked the laid back nature of our get together. Looking forward to connecting with them next month and hopefully meeting a few more. Thank you, Tara and Justine, for leading the way in Michigan. To learn more about the TYT Army and how you can help from home or even start your own team, head to tyt.com/army. Check your spam folder for lost emails to stay up to date with our events.
You want to know how you could save money and save the planet? Hello, I got an awesome option for you guys. Aspiration.com/TYT. You plant not 1, not 5, 10 trees when you sign up. You know what trees do? Not a big deal, but one large tree can provide a day's supply of oxygen for up to 4 people. That's 40 people's oxygen just by signing up at aspiration.com/TYT. Sign up for a free spend and save account right now at aspiration.com/TYT.
I'm Mike Shekels, and I'm the Director of Technical Operations, so if you're frantically tweeting at us that something's broken, thank you, because I'm fixing it. This here is Johnny Greenwald.
I'm Manager of Post-Production Technology. Simplest terms is I deliver the content.
And this is our master control room. We have many, many more destinations than ever before, and we created this room to consolidate it, to make sure that everything's going out is up to standard, so we meet all of our contractual agreements.
Like all small businesses, we're struggling through this pandemic right now. We are doing a drive to keep TYT healthy. We want to be able to keep doing it, and it's been a Herculean task.
Ready for transport.
We're trying to raise $2 million overall, $200,000 a month if we can. If you can, and only if you can, tyt.com/go. Seriously, because we can't sustain this show without you. So thank you for making all this possible.
Where else can I feel as free as I do here to do what I do? And I wouldn't be able to do what I do if it weren't for all the people who have really carried us throughout the years.
You're our ultimate boss. We report
Yes.
to you guys, And if you don't like what we're doing on air or we're not telling the truth, boom, you fire us.
We're not the Young Turks, you're the Young Turks.
Keep TYT alive, healthy, wonderful, awesome, independent, progressive. Keep it all those things. In fact, we have a new theme, Press On. Get it? It's a double meaning. TYT.com/go. I know what you're thinking. Cenk, where do I get unlimited, commission-free stock and ETF trades? Man, do I have good news for you. Doe.com/TYT. Yes, it's really unlimited trading. Yes, it's totally commission-free. Yes, they explain what an ETF is if you don't know it. But that's what's great about Doe, because they have wonderful explainer videos and you got zero minimum balance. You got nothing for commissions. Doe.com/TYT.
Today, a terrible day for the internet, a terrible day for America. The internet as we know it is not going to exist anymore.
A real dark day for information and yet another way that they're bleeding out the democracy.
We're now going to have these gatekeepers of information deciding what we can and can't see, and that's what scares me the most.
Whether you're conservative or progressive or anywhere in the middle, this is the one thing we should all agree to. Protect the internet, because the establishment is coming for it. Don't let them destroy the internet.
Welcome to the conversation on TYT. Michael Schur with you today, and we're going to speak with someone who actually may be a familiar face to some of you for his performances in The Pirates of the Caribbean and 24, which is where I would probably remember him from. Greg Ellis joins us from Los Angeles today. Greg, thanks for being on the show.
Thanks for having me on, Michael.
And we are here to talk about things, not that the Pirates of the Caribbean and 24 were frivolous for you, their work, and that's how you make your living. But we're here to talk about something more serious, and it's not even just the issue of suicide itself, but it's the issue of suicide as it pertains with great specificity to men in divorce. And we all know, or many of us do know, that men are more likely in bigger numbers, I think, and you'll elucidate us on that, in bigger numbers than women to commit suicide. I'd love to know, Greg, what brought you to this as an issue, and maybe if you could share a little of the statistics that we may not know about.
Yeah, it'd be my pleasure, Michael. So what brought me to this was being thrust into this dystopian Kafka trap of divorce, the family law system. Overnight, I became homeless and almost destitute, having forged quite a successful career. And it was all based on hearsay. I had no idea, like many men who are thrown into this system, that criminals get the presumption of innocence, and the Western civilization of jurisprudence is upended when it comes to family law, and specifically men and fathers. So I started diving into this. I started writing a book and started a video podcast series called The Respondent. Named it The Respondent really because that's what you're tagged as in a legal setting. The other side is a plaintiff or a petitioner. And it's really three root cause areas that I focus on: suicide, divorce, and social isolation. Suicide's skyrocketing right now. 800,000 people die by suicide every year. That's 132 suicides a day. That's one person every 40 seconds. Divorce is escalating. American men kill themselves 4 times more than women, and divorced men, it was staggering when I found out, they kill themselves 8 times more than women. And for every child who loses their mother to suicide during or after divorce, that's 8 children that lose a father. And then if you put the third of the causes in there, social isolation and COVID-19, with the damaging, I think the really disturbingly damaging public health messages that are corroding our collective well-being, like physical distancing and social connectedness is what we should be encouraging people to do. That's vital, but we're not. We're telling people to socially distance. And so families are on life support and they need lifelines. And I think with men in particular, it's hard sometimes to talk about feelings. So I encourage men to open up, destigmatize even the phrase mental health.
Where does the pivot happen, or where did it happen for you, where you take what you know and you decide to share it and you decide to help other people, where you feel A, well enough to do it, but B, sort of giving enough and almost called to do it?
Yeah, it's a good point. You know, I talked about a curse can be for me, a curse can be your calling and also a blessing. I learned so much when this system forced me into this dystopian nightmare. I pushed back, I quested for knowledge and reason and understanding every time the system told me I was this or identified me as that. I refused to believe it, but I also quested for deeper understanding. So I started to study philosophy and then phenomenology, specifically the phenomenology of feelings and affect theory, and really went into a deep dive on learning. And I guess the night that it changed for me in terms of myself, with the capital S, was when I asked myself the old Socrates question: who am I? You know thyself. And it was one night about 4 or 5 years ago, and I really got into this dialectic of meaningful question, answer, thesis, synthesis, thesis, antithesis, synthesis, and I just kept going deeper and deeper, and I got to really know myself more than I'd ever done in my life. And so I started to move forward to this third act, if you will, the third act of my life, which it felt like I'd always gone out there with my career to get what could I get, what role could I get, what monetary value could I get, what material possession could I get, and then transitioning through to what can I give, how can I be of service, what can I give back, and I may not have the credentials of a psychologist or a phenomenologist, but I certainly have the experiential data of having studied this and been through this system for 5 years.
Was there a point where you saw yourself at your lowest, and you thought about the lowest point that other people were in when they go through something like this? Because it is on paper a routine passage for many people. Divorce, I'm divorced, you're divorced, many people are. But what is it that was the exception in your case that made that happen?
I think it was the catastrophic nature of suddenly and shockingly it happened. Literally, it was in an instant. I was at home playing with my sons who were 8 and 10 at the time. And a phone call was placed with a wild accusation about me. And I was literally pulled from my home within a few hours in handcuffs and incarcerated. And that was the first of 4 or 5 incarcerations. And I think going on that odyssey, if you will, of self-exploration and recovery from that, I found myself a couple of times at I call it the brinking point. I literally was living on the razor's edge of existential terror. And it was, conversely and paradoxically, when I entered the court system pretty soon in what was going on with me, I thought that I was entering the heart of America, the beating heart of America's justice system. I believed in America. I believed in the establishments of law and order and power. And that's when I left America. That's when justice stopped. That's when it got worse. But perversely, that's when I realized that it wasn't just me. There are tens of thousands of men and forsaken fathers who'd been through the same things. And I've read the suicide notes from good men. I'm not talking about the bad men. There are some bad men out there, but the good men who were connected with their fathers, with their sons. And that was heartbreaking to me. And I just knew that I had to do something and find a way creatively to create something that I could give back.
Stokely Carmichael, during the civil rights movement, he was sort of a lion of the civil rights movement at a time. He moved to Africa afterwards, became Kwame Ture, and his teachings were about what happened to him very often in America. But he talked about not that he left America, that America left him. And when you see in the civil rights movement, that was, he said, a shared experience for many people who were let down by what was written versus what was being practiced. What is the one thing, and I'm sure there are a litany of them, but we don't have a litany of time, the one thing that you could change about the court experience that you experienced for others too?
Yeah, well, the first advice I would say is to keep out of court and don't sign with an attorney. I know it sounds perverse to say that, but as much as possible, don't. I think the one policy change that I would make is default shared parenting, which is the presumption of innocence of both parties in terms of family law and the parents, and the children should be the focus. And there's only one state that has that, and that's Kentucky. Oddly, and it only has it because the state legislature have it that the attorneys, law firms, and family law practices can't. It's illegal to lobby the state legislature, so they pushed it through there. Everywhere else, it's a churning practice. It's a nearly $60 billion industry. So, the advice I would give people is to stay out of court if you can mediate. Arbitrate if you can't mediate, and try and work it out before that crisis point hits, and find a way to look at self. We so often in this society are reactive, and we focus on the other, whether it be political parties or partners, interpersonal communication, and I often say start from an I place and try and be responsible, which after all is the theme of The Respondent: less reactivity, more responsibility, be self-reliant.
And that's, bringing it back to suicide. That's what the self is. It's sort of really sort of valuing the self and learning how to do that as an important part. Two, these have to be sort of quick answers because we're up against time, but I'm going to ask them very quickly. Where do things stand with you? And then where can people read The Respondent and hear more about what you have to say?
Yeah, things stand well with me. I'm still leaning into more learning. I'm learning about affect theory right now in terms of The Respondent. There are new episodes that come out every 2 weeks on Sundays at 1 p.m. Pacific time. You can find out about me and The Respondent mainly on my website, realgregellis.com. TheRespondent.com will be launching later in the year or early next year. That's going to be a hub for men and fathers to come together and talk about emotions and feelings or some of the challenges and pain. I think we are all struggling with something, and particularly now in this difficult time. And the inescapability of trauma can sometimes be overwhelming and seemingly insurmountable, but it's not. There are just waves of it, and you just have to ride out that wave.
Thanks so much for being on the conversation. This is the Young Turks.
We're very honest that we're progressives. We call the Young Turks home of progressives, and we support progressive candidates.
There has been this reemergence of political activism, especially among young people.
This weekend was the second Women's March, both across the US and across the world. So these people are not simply marching, they're not simply talking, they're also running for office. And when they do run, they're gonna make a difference.
Joe Crowley is congressman from New York. He's very powerful. Why? He raised a lot of money. But there's someone finally challenging him.
We need to have representation that advocates as fiercely for working class people as possible from this seat.
If candidates like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez even get a little bit of media attention outside of what the Young Turks does, they have an excellent chance of winning. She's gonna win. She's gonna win.
68% reporting.
The majority of Americans want Medicare for all. So I don't care what you and your corporate cronies want. What I care about is what the American people want.
We believe in total change. Everything runs on donor money. And that is what we will fight, and that is exactly why they don't like us.
We're having fun, it's election night!
Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez has defeated Joe Crowley.
Here we go again!
Ladies and gentlemen, we got him.
Down goes Crowley! Down goes Crowley! Down goes Manafort! Down goes Cohen! Women came out in record numbers in the primaries. They said, you'll be lucky to get one candidate. We now have 12 that have won their primaries. Bezos and Amazon announcing that they are going to go to a 15-hour minimum wage.
We're making progress. Let's keep going.
Many of these women made history.
The biggest victories, all women of color. Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar, Sharice Davids and Deb Haaland.
And I want to go to Congress because I want to change those things.
I'm calling it. Jamal Bowman has won. Down goes Engel. Down goes Engel.
For a long time, we have not had progressives in power. It's going to be something to behold.
Welcome to the Happy Half Hour, everybody. After a week of soul-crushing news, we break out the good stuff. Good news, good videos, good people, and, of course, drink good alcohol. That's the worst thing I've ever had.
This is the best show.
Full disclosure, we did do a shot right before the show began. It says,
Let's
flamingo.
Flamingo.
The reason you had trouble with that word is it's not a word. Okay. This is the one of everything.
I've got a rash. Could I just put it on that to see if it'll take it off?
What did you used to think this was?
Bull piss.
Drink it, swallow it, spit it. Oh, that's needed after a day like this.
Cheers to Brett Ehrlich.
Climax. Uranus smells like farts. Because of course it does. This is the worst sketch ever of a perp. But guess what, ladies and gentlemen? They found the guy. This is Sophie's super happy dog story of the week.
This dog is so precious and deserves the world. I'm just not drinking that beer.
Here's my dog. This is Onyx.
Yeah, I would just say that he's exotic because he's not your traditional dog. Still 12 out of 10 because they're all good.
Well, if that made you happy, just wait till you see the best thing ever of the week. There is a woman who moves like a horse.
Why do I want to go home and like try this?
We're actually going to show you the running butthole challenge right now. What's happening?
No, that's just wrong. Every way.
And we'll see you next time.
Hey, Dave. As you can probably see, Skype froze.
Yes.
Frozen crashed.
You know, I'm watching that documentary on the Vietnam War, and
there was a TV journalist in the middle of some tiny little village in Vietnam doing live TV as the soldiers were burning the Vietnamese huts. And it didn't crash. And that was 1965, and he was in Vietnam.
This is the Young Turks. This is The Conversation. I'm Michael Schur, and I'm excited. You know, a lot of people have the conversation, who would you like to have dinner with most? And for many people, it's presidents and popes and generals. To me, I have to put David Becker on the list because he has the answers to so many questions that are really bothering me right now that I would love to know the answers to. David is the director of the Center for Election Innovation and Research, and he joins us today. Where are you, David, today?
I'm in the suburbs of Washington, D.C., where CEIR is based.
Okay, great. And so just outside the Capitol, David, you know, you're like the doctor at the dinner party, I'm sure, right now, where everybody has an ache and they want to know how it can be fixed. I want to know a little bit about the question that you are most getting now, and we'll talk a little bit about what the center's doing, but I want to know what it is that people are asking you most now.
The question I get most from my friends and colleagues and others is, what can I do? They're very worried about American democracy. They're very worried about what's going to happen in this election season. And people, in a very inspiring way, really want to do something that's constructive. And I know this is not entirely a satisfactory answer, but the best thing I can tell everyone to do is obviously vote and make a plan to vote. Do it as early as possible. Check your registration now. If you want to vote by mail, if you think that's the right way for you to vote, especially if you're a frequent voter, plan now, get your ballot early and return it early, even return it in person if you can. And honestly, vote in person if you can and you feel comfortable with that, especially early. Because one of the things that I think is gonna be most important is getting as many ballots counted early on election night as possible. And making sure that we don't create a vacuum where people can spread disinformation about the process or make people worry about things being rigged. That process is very normal. It's going to take some time to count ballots. But among the very first ballots that are counted, the early in-person ballots are counted among the very first in most states. So if you can, get out there, make a plan and vote early. You will be doing your part for democracy, and not just because your ballot will be counted early and you'll know it's counted, but because you'll be taking the pressure off of election day for those people who need to vote on election day. So if you can get that done, you'll be doing a huge service to democracy.
And that's, you know, that's so important. It's such important advice to heed. And I think that for the people that want to make this thing go well, it's easily heated. There are people who do want to make it go well, but don't have confidence. And as I've traveled the country as a reporter, it seems to almost the last thing we need is more voter apathy. But I would say the notion that, oh, why bother voting now if they're not even going to count it or it's going to be rigged? Why bother doing it? So they've almost added to apathy. And those who are doing it on the Republican side, in this case, I should say, through the administration and through the conversations that have been happening, are, I think, hurting themselves in a way. Am I wrong about that?
No, you're exactly right. And I will say it is the goal of the adversaries that America has, our foreign adversaries. Their primary goal is not to elect a particular candidate. That is a secondary goal, sometimes very advantageous to them. But their primary goal is to get citizens of a democracy to lose confidence in that democracy, to lose confidence in the elections and their outcomes. And so if we succumb to apathy, if we succumb to despair, we're actually giving in to what our adversaries want. And now we've got a White House that is actively engaging in disinformation and trying to spread a lack of confidence amongst our voters. We've got to fight back against that. And by the way, this is not the entire Republican Party. There are many Republican secretaries of state and local election officials who have been working diligently to make elections work well in their states. And we as Americans should be supporting them. We shouldn't be looking to try to divide ourselves across partisan lines. We're going to need Republicans and Democrats both to make this democracy work. And there are people on the left who are spreading rumors that make us doubt our democracy as well. So this is not just in one party. I'm not trying to spread a false equivalence here. It isn't equivalent. There is definitely the bully pulpit of the White House and the disinformation they're spreading is particularly damaging. But the best thing we can do is to be confident in our fellow citizens who are helping make this election work and vote as early as possible.
Let's talk about the center. You gave a little bit of a segue there when you were talking about secretaries of state. The center and the work that you are doing is focused on what precisely? And you just got a big grant or a donation, and I would say an admonition to do well with it. And now you are doing well with it.
Yeah, so I've been working in elections for 22 years. I was a Justice Department attorney in the voting section of the Civil Rights Division in both the Clinton and Bush administrations, second Bush administrations. And I worked at Pew and led their elections team for many years. And I founded the Center for Election Innovation Research, which is a nonprofit and nonpartisan, and works to help election officials across the country and across the political spectrum make elections work better for all voters. And we've been working all across the country to help election officials as they're trying to face the threat of foreign interference, which is very, very real. Face the challenges of voter apathy, and then of course during the last several months, we have layered the pandemic on top of this. This is going to be an election like we've never seen before. And when we all get a vaccine and we're able to touch each other and hug each other again, find your local election official and hug them. They need it. They are really struggling. So they're facing incredible challenges. But yes, Mark Zuckerberg and Priscilla Chan gave my organization $50 million to re-grant to states to help them educate voters, which is so important right now because what we're seeing is so many changes in this election compared to last elections. Options to vote, where to vote, when to vote, whether to vote by mail or in person, even recruiting a whole new generation of poll workers to replace the older generation of poll workers who might be more at risk. And so we've notified states actually just today about the awards of those grants. We exceeded the amount of grants that were available. Half the states applied for grants. All of them received some money, almost evenly divided exactly between Republican and Democratic states. And we're very, very pleased that we could assist states in providing mailers and paid media and electronic messaging to voters to help them navigate the process to make this election a success.
The idea that, I mean, talk us through a couple of things. Naked ballots in Pennsylvania. Tell me a little bit about why people are so upset about them and describe it a little bit if you would.
So first we need to understand Pennsylvania as a state has very little history of mail balloting. They used to have excuse required. Only in the last year have they changed that to no excuse required. And they're gonna go from much less than 5% mail balloting to maybe as much as 30, 40, or 50% mail balloting in one election cycle. That is an incredibly challenging thing to do. And what they do in Pennsylvania historically is they provide two envelopes. An envelope that is the outside envelope that has the voter's personal information on it that election officials use to validate the ballot, which is very important. It's why mail voting is secure. And then an interior ballot that is just for secrecy. So once they separate the exterior ballot, they still have an interior ballot. That wasn't much of a problem when so few people voted by mail, but now we're expecting hundreds of thousands of people to vote by mail in Pennsylvania, and it's going to be important to educate them about this because a court has ruled that if that interior envelope is not used, then the ballot should be rejected. That's probably too harsh a penalty in this case, but it's the law as it currently stands. We'll see if that continues through the litigation to stand. But voters in Pennsylvania should know you're going to get two envelopes. Use both envelopes. That will be the way to ensure that your ballot is counted if you're voting by mail.
Is there a hope that we will ever get to a uniform voting system, whether it be by mail or whether it be at the polls? So many people outside of this country who ask me, friends from other countries say, how do you do it this way? There's a rule, 50 different sets of rules for 50 states.
It's not just 50. I mean, people always ask me like, what about the election that's coming up? And I have to tell them it's not one election. It's actually more like 10,000 little elections because of the local jurisdictions that run elections all over the country. So on the one hand, that does make things challenging because we end up having some level of different standards across the states and localities, different technology that's used. But on the other hand, it makes us very resilient against attacks. It's really hard to attack, if you're in Russia, attack an election system that has 10,000 different nodes of contact rather than one single node of contact. So it's a balance constantly. I don't know that we're ever gonna get to a single set of rules for the entire country, but there are a set of best practices that are percolating up. And I think those best practices are being very effectively shared between the states. And of course, my organization and many others are trying to help get to that point.
Are we aided by the advance we have here? I remember in Bush v. Gore at the end of the 2000 election, it just sort of took us all by surprise. We
Yeah.
didn't know what to do. Now we've got this lead time. How important is that?
I think it's really important. I see, in some ways, I get a little bit frustrated by the worst case scenarios because I worry a little bit that it's telling voters that their votes might not matter and might not count. And it's really important for voters to know their votes matter and they will count, and election officials are going to ensure that. However, I think we're prepared for most of, or if not all of the worst case scenarios. I think people are going to find that election day and the days that follow go better maybe than they expected. There are scenarios, maybe not probable, but possible, where we know who won the presidency by Wednesday morning. There are scenarios even just a few days later. It's not going to take weeks. It's not going to take months. The one thing that we can't plan for is if the margins are so narrow in multiple states, then we're going to be in trouble. But that's nothing we can plan for. That is just something that might happen if we're that narrowly divided. But I can tell you, election officials, whether it's in just the swing states, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Florida, North Carolina, or in states where we don't expect to swing, they're ready. I mean, they're as ready as I've ever seen them. And I think we've got this.
David, thanks for the work you're doing. Thanks for the work also that the Center for Election Innovation and Research is doing there in Washington. We all appreciate it.
Well, the Young Turks, Jake Kasparian. All right, lots of giant news for you guys. Have you guys heard about the tax returns? Jeez, Lord mercy. We're going to talk about that. Have you heard about his former campaign manager nearly killing himself? We're going to talk about that. We got new video on that, how cops handled it. They tackled him. We have that. We have so many amazing stories for you guys. Okay, you know what else we have? Tomorrow, Skittles. The first presidential debate is tomorrow. Like, what the heck? There's so much news going on that it's almost unbelievable that we're already at the presidential debate. So 6 o'clock Pacific, 9 o'clock Eastern. Where are you coming? You're coming right here. Everybody knows that, okay? Me, Anna, and John are covering debate. Michael Schur's on location, okay? So will he get some Trump surrogates? Will they be sane and not high? I don't know, okay? But he'll probably get some folks, okay? So it's going to be great coverage. We'll watch the debate together, and then we'll do the analysis right after. It's on all the platforms that we're normally on, Roku, Zumo, Pluto TV, Comcast, Samsung, and so many others. You get YouTube TV, Facebook, you got it. All right, guys, let's do it. Let's get to the stories right away. Anna, what's up?
All right. Well, over the weekend, legacy media outlets were reporting on a huge breaking news story. In fact, the type of breaking news story they typically don't like to cover. An incredibly wealthy person hasn't been paying his taxes. Donald Trump's tax returns were obtained by the New York Times, nearly 2 decades worth of his taxes. And based on what we know from the reporting, if there is an actual investigation into some of the deductions he's taken, there could have been possible crimes committed. Now, based on what we know from the reporting so far, there are some sketchy details about what he's filed in his taxes. And if these deductions are not protected under tax law, well, then he's committed crimes. Now, let me give you some highlights, some details, and I'll explain what I'm talking about. So the main takeaway from the story, something that you're likely to have seen already, but just in case, is the fact that Trump paid just $750 in federal income taxes the year he won the presidency, so in 2016. In his first year in the White House, he paid another $750. He had paid no income taxes at all in 10 of the previous 15 years, largely because he reported losing much more money than he made. Now, he bragged quite a bit about how he's this billionaire and he's a successful billionaire, this and that. So based on what we know from this reporting, either one of two things can be true or both things can be true. Number one, he's incredibly incompetent and continues to just bleed money and isn't actually wealthy when you consider his liabilities versus his income. Number two, he could be completely lying about some of the deductions that he's taking. He might be taking unlawful deductions. And if that's the case, he's breaking the law, he's committing tax crimes. But, more importantly, this is the kind of stuff that in some cases is protected by tax law, which allows major corporations, for instance, like Amazon, to get away with paying nothing in taxes. Again, there needs to be a thorough investigation into this, but let me give you more details. Hanging over him, we learned through this reporting, is a decade-long audit battle with the Internal Revenue Service over the legitimacy of a $72.9 million tax refund that he claimed and received. He received a tax refund of $72.9 million. After declaring huge losses, an adverse ruling could cost him more than $100 million. So we've all heard about the audit that Donald Trump is undergoing. He cited the audit as the reason for why he didn't want to release his taxes, even though there's no law preventing him from releasing his taxes, even if he's being audited. And so now through this reporting, we find out that he has this massive tax liability if this audit shows that he unlawfully, declared these deductions. Cenk.
Yeah, so first of all, understand that there's two different issues here. One is it okay to take deductions at all? And the answer to that is definitely. So if you are losing money, that is your expenses, and the reason you can't claim any taxes is because you didn't make any profit. That's normal. And does Trump have some of that? Yes, he actually has a lot of that because he's totally and utterly incompetent. Literally everything he runs, with the brief exception of Mar-a-Lago while he's president, which has greatly increased its rates, has lost money. Literally everything he's ever done in his life that he has managed has lost money. So it's not just an accounting gimmick like, oh, it's the rich avoiding their taxes. No, he's actually a terrible, terrible businessman that cannot make money. Now, that's half the story, but the other half is what Anna's talking about here. On top of that, he appears to be doing tax evasion. So and that's the part that can get him in criminal trouble. I guarantee you that if you did 10% of what Donald Trump has done, you would be in massive criminal trouble. So, I mean, taking $72 million that you shouldn't have taken from the IRS is insanity. And any other rich people, look, some of them probably do, they all do, not all, but a lot of them do tons of tax avoidance, which is already a huge problem in our system. That's why the system has to be changed. And honestly, even Democrats help them avoid taxes because they're their donors. But then there's tax evasion, which is a separate issue, which is a crime. So if you claim things that are not really business expenses, you do it on purpose, you claim things that you should not claim, that is against the law. And it appears that Donald Trump did that on a number of occasions.
Yes, exactly. So I also want to remind you all of some of Michael Cohen's testimony, because he did testify before Congress in February of 2019. And during that testimony, Cohen recalled Trump showing him a huge check from the U.S. Treasury some years earlier and musing that he could not believe how stupid the government was for giving someone like him that much money back. Also, let me note that there seems to be some inconsistencies between his public disclosures and what he noted in his taxes. For instance, in 2018, Trump announced in his disclosure that he made at least $434.9 million. The tax records deliver a very different portrait of his bottom line, $47.4 million in losses. So that should be something that gets investigated and looked into. And one other thing that Michael Cohen said during his testimony before the House was what you're about to watch during AOC's line of questioning. Take a look.
Mr. Cohen, I want to ask you about your assertion that the president may have improperly devalued his assets to avoid paying taxes. According to an August 21st, 2016 report by the Washington Post, while the president claimed in financial disclosure forms that Trump National Golf Club in Jupiter, Florida, was worth more than $50 million, he had reported otherwise to local tax authorities that the course was worth, quote, no more than $5 million. Mr. Cohen, do you know whether this specific report is accurate?
It's identical to what he did at Trump National Golf Club at Briarcliff Manor.
Do you know, to your knowledge, was the president interested in reducing his local real estate bills, tax bills?
Yes.
And how did he do that?
What you do is you deflate the value of the asset, and then you put in a request to the tax department for a deduction.
During the same testimony, Michael Cohen also mentioned that Donald Trump likes to inflate his assets in order to tap into loans that he has no business qualifying for.
So when it comes to these issues, there are, again, several different ways of looking at it. Number one, on the issue of if you can prove that he inflated his asset value to get loans and deflated their value for the IRS, clearly a crime. If you did it, guaranteed you'd go to prison, guaranteed. So we have a question. Do we have real justice system in America, or are the rich and powerful allowed to get away with everything? I mean, the guy is already paying $750 a year in taxes when he claims. Now, remember, his claim is he has $10 billion. A guy who has $10 billion is paying $750 in taxes. I mean, I would be shocked if you paid less. If you paid, less than $750. I mean, we almost all paid way more than $750, right? So there's that inequity, but of the justice system. But if the justice system was actually fair, there's no question that prosecutors would go after Donald Trump on those issues. Then there's a question of where are the loans coming from, and could that then create more problems? So we've got 3 different buckets here. One is unknown, and that's a very interesting bucket. So if you see his taxes, you don't necessarily see where the loans are coming from. That would be in other documents. And so people have a lot of questions, including Nancy Pelosi today said, what if it's a foreign government and our president owes hundreds of millions of dollars to a foreign government? Could they use that as leverage against them? It's a rare point that I agree with Nancy Pelosi on. And if you could ever use leverage on someone that cares about money, that would be Donald Trump. I mean, no one cares more about money. He says it over and over and over again. I don't want to hold it against him that he's so dead broken, so poor and poverty stricken. He might literally be homeless once he leaves the White House. But if they have leverage over him, that's fair. Second bucket is Ladder. It's a company that people use because they're a lender of last resort. So when you're a loser like Donald Trump and you've already declared bankruptcy 6 different times and nobody else will touch you because you're toxic, you go to Ladder and pay much higher rates because they're willing to do riskier things. But now the problem is he's president, right? Some of those loans are coming due as soon as he's out of office. We'll talk more about that later. But are they going to foreclose on the president? Are they going to evict him from the White House? No, the White House is not his and they can't evict him. But that's another set of problems for Donald Trump. But at least those are not legal problems, okay? Now, you turn to Deutsche Bank. That's a third bucket. That's where a lot of his loans originate. And that is where things are super weird. So now look, I don't, and I'm saying this very, very literally, okay? I don't know that these are in any way connected, but a Deutsche Bank executive that had left a suicide note of, I'm so sorry for all the terrible things I did at Deutsche Bank, basically, committed suicide in 2014. Trump was not yet president, but was clearly, him and Russian oligarchs and many others were Deutsche Bank clients at that time. And then just last year, the executive in charge of okaying Donald Trump's loans also committed suicide at the age of 55. Now, there are family members who are concerned about that, and the timing of it is pretty stunning. So I have no idea if they're connected, but 2 high-profile Deutsche Bank executives, including the one in charge of Trump's loans, both commit suicide in their mid-50s. So, and right now prosecutors are looking into Deutsche Bank. They might find nothing. It might have been that the first guy was not at all related to Trump. It might have been related to LIBOR. And again, I'm being very literal. It's not like wink, wink. No, it really might have been related to other scandals that Deutsche Bank were doing. And the second suicide might have been personal. We have no idea. But prosecutors are looking into that. And so to see what the situation is, whether it's related to Trump or not related to Trump. But there is a giant cloud hanging over Deutsche Bank. So that is more issues potentially for Donald Trump.
Okay, so there are other potential issues based on what we've learned through this reporting. So for instance, he will deduct administrative costs related to his business. And if you really look into it, some of these administrative costs seem to be inflated. So for instance, tax records do not have the specificity to evaluate the legitimacy of every business expense Trump claims to reduce his taxable income. For instance, without any explanation in his returns, the general and administrative expenses at his Bedminster Golf Club in New Jersey increased 5-fold from 2016 to 2017. So for administrative costs to go up 5 times, 5-fold in the span of 1 year, I think is a little weird, right? So there's that. And then the final thing is, you mentioned it a little bit, Cenk, but some of his business dealings outside the United States, not because, making money outside of the United States is legal in and of itself, but because of how he could be using his office of the presidency to, enrich himself, enrich his personal businesses. That is a problem. That is a violation of the Emoluments Clause in our Constitution. But that's the one issue where I think even if it's proven and there's like indisputable evidence that he's been violating the Emoluments Clause, keep in mind that Donald Trump has a lot to gain from ensuring that the Supreme Court is, skewed in his favor. And I just don't think he's ever going to face any consequences for that whatsoever. For tax fraud, will he? I don't know. I've kind of learned my lesson about holding out hope that there's ever going to be any justice in regard to Donald Trump. I mean, he has succeeded in defunding the IRS to the point where they only audit people living in poverty, people who barely make any money. People who are wealthy like Donald Trump barely get investigated. And while he's undergoing an audit, I mean, how long does an audit last? I don't really get it. So there's a huge conflict of interest. While he's president of the United States, facing this massive audit for potentially committing massive tax fraud, think about how much influence and sway he has over the IRS, how it gets funded, how it gets dismantled. I don't mean to be a downer. I just think if you guys think there's going to be some consequence for him, just don't hold your breath. That's where I'm at with this story.
No, I hear you, Anna. You have excellent reasons why. So number one, if he wins re-election, good night, Irene. Ain't nobody going to come after him for emoluments clause. What the Democrats are? No, they're going to hide in a cave for 4 years. They're going to be so scared, and they'll have blown another election to him. No, he will get away with everything if he wins re-election. If he loses re-election, the first thing Joe Biden's going to do is say, we look forward, not backward. I swear to God, I'll never go after Donald Trump, because that's how Democrats roll. So I know all of that. So I'm not holding my breath for any of that. But I'm going to throw one more wild card, specifically about his foreign entanglements. Remember, a lot of those governments are not exactly good guys, okay, whether it's Putin or Erdogan or Duterte. And so they gave him huge licensing fees. Now, some before he was president, some during his presidency. And licensing fees, as I've told you on the Young Turks before, are super easy to play around with because they're intangible value of his name. They're paying for his name. So they could make it really high, they could make it really low, or they could stop it altogether. They could threaten to stop it altogether if he doesn't play ball. So if those governments don't turn over any tapes, and we don't have any tapes of Trump having very frank conversations about it, then he'll get away with it. But is it possible just to mess with him based on broken promises, mess it with America, et cetera, that one of those authoritarian leaders at a later date goes, oh, by the way, here's your clown ass president that we bought for $500,000. And they release the tapes, and then he's screwed. So that's at least possible. And that would probably, on that issue, be the only way that they get it.
We're going to take a quick break, but we're not done with this tax story yet. When we come back, we're going to discuss why Trump is likely to want to stay in power, why he's so desperate to stay in power, and how the answer is tied to what we've learned through his taxes. We'll be right back.
Many of you already know that the TYT Army has been officially organizing for the past year. They're making decisions on which candidates and elected officials to help, and always coming up with ways to inform people about progressive policies. Now, we want to give a huge shout out to some special volunteers and highlight accomplishments of our TYT Army. In Michigan, State Leader Tara West and Captain Justine Robinson organized the team's first Beer and Politics. How fun does that sound? Look, they thought of this idea at one of their monthly meetups in order to help connect TYT supporters and grow their team's volunteers. Here's what Tara had to say. Our first Beer and Politics event in Grand Rapids was a success. We had 5 new people show up who are enthusiastic about TYT. They all found out about our event through our text bank, and they liked the laid-back nature of our get-together. Looking forward to connecting with them next month and hopefully meeting a few more. Thank you, Tara and Justine, for leading the way in Michigan. To learn more about the TYT Army and how you can help from home or even start your own team, head to tyt.com/army. Check your spam folder for lost emails to stay up to date with our events.
You want to know how you could save money and save the planet? Hello, I got an awesome option for you guys. aspiration.com/TYT. You plant not 1, not 5, 10 trees when you sign up. You know what trees do? Not a big deal, but one large tree can provide a day's supply of oxygen for up to 4 people. That's 40 people's oxygen just by signing up at aspiration.com/TYT. Sign up for a free spend and save account right now at aspiration.com/TYT.
I'm Mike Shekels, and I'm the Director of Technical Operations, so if you're frantically tweeting at us that something's broken, thank you, because I'm fixing it. This here is Johnny Greenwald.
I'm Manager of Post-Production Technology. Simplest terms is I deliver the content.
And this is our master control room. We have many, many more destinations than ever before, and we created this room to consolidate it, to make sure that everything's going out is up to standard, so we meet all of our contractual agreements.
Like all small businesses, we're struggling through this pandemic right now. We are doing a drive to keep TYT healthy. We want to be able to keep doing it, and it's been a Herculean task.
Ready for transport.
We're trying to raise $2 million overall, $200,000 a month if we can. If you can, and only if you can, tyt.com/go. Seriously, because we can't sustain this show without you. So thank you for making all this possible.
Where else can I feel as free as I do here to do what I do? And I wouldn't be able to do what I do if it weren't for all the people who have really carried us throughout the years.
You're our ultimate boss. We report to you guys, and if you don't like what we're doing on air or we're not telling the truth, boom, you fire us.
We're not the Young Turks, you're the Young Turks.
Keep TYT alive, healthy, wonderful, awesome, independent, progressive, keep it all those things. In fact, we have a new theme, Press On. Get it? It's a double meaning. tyt.com/go. I know what you're thinking. Cenk, where do I get unlimited, commission-free stock and ETF trades? Man, do I have good news for you. dough.com/TYT. Yes, it's really unlimited trading. Yes, it's totally commission-free. Yes, they explain what an ETF is if you don't know it. That's what's great about Dough, because they have wonderful explainer videos, and you got 0 minimum balance. You got nothing for commissions. dough.com/TYT.
Today, a terrible day for the internet, a terrible day for America. The internet as we know it is not going to exist anymore.
A real dark day for information, and yet another way that they're bleeding out the democracy.
We're now going to have these gatekeepers of information deciding what we can and can't see, and that's what scares me the most.
Whether you're conservative or progressive or anywhere in the middle, this is the one thing we should all agree to. Protect the internet, because the establishment is coming for it. Don't let them destroy the internet.
All right, back on the Young Turks. You guys have too many good comments. Let's go to them right away. In the member section, Jess writes in, so please, Trump, tell us again how the New York Times reporting is at the same time both fake news and illegally obtained. Excellent point. Which one is it? Is it fake or is it real, but they obtained it in the wrong way? Of course it's real. Gabby Marita says right-wingers have a term for someone who refuses to pay taxes while at the same time cheats the government out of money they don't deserve. A welfare queen. Hashtag Looter Donald is a welfare queen. I like hashtag Looter Donald a lot. LMG15 says Trump has a reverse Midas touch and America is on track to be his 7th bankruptcy. That's also very right. Here's new members on YouTube, and you can click the join button below the video to become a member as well. Janika Elaine, Luis Garcia Zapatero, Michael Robinson, Gerald O'Brien, Margaret Spellin, Mark Sarnow, Rick J just upgraded, Steve McLean, Hoshi Reed, Anna Garcia, Jacqueline Yuthoff, Hordor, that's my favorite, Chris Boych, and Mike Charleboys. And I have time to read just 2 more from YouTube Super Chat. Omega says, Cenk, I came out too harsh and I humbly apologize. I'm a nobody with infinite ideas and 0 charisma. You, Anna, and TYT are true heroes, but lives and freedom are at stake, and I can't prove myself in 270 characters. Omega, I love your brother. Nobody's a 0. We're all together make up the Young Turks, okay? So hang in there
And I'm sorry I don't have time to spend with every single viewer, of course, right? But I'm reading all your comments and I appreciate all that you've done. Lonely Soul writes in, too strong, Democratic Party is a ghost ship and it's time to take it over. I love that, obviously, which actually leads perfectly into our sponsor, Too Strong Coffee, is doing giveaways. They're actually giving away coffee, free coffee for a whole year. And apparently tomorrow is International Coffee Day. We'll talk about it again tomorrow. But the way to win it is to go to TooStrongCoffee.com/win. TooStrongCoffee.com/win. And it's organic, it's fair trade. It gives to progressive causes. And if you go to that website, it'll show you how to win free coffee for the whole year, which actually is a really good value. All right, thank you guys. Anna, what's next?
All right. So we have another angle to talk about Trump's tax cuts from, or I should say, tax avoidance. And it has to do with why he's so desperate to stay in power. So based on new reporting by the New York Times, following the fact that they obtained nearly 2 decades worth of Donald Trump's tax returns, we're getting a clearer picture as to why Donald Trump, who doesn't seem to enjoy leading the country, is so desperate to remain in power. It might just be that he's power hungry and crazy, but I think it also has a lot to do with the fact that while in power, he has some sway over so many different parts of his financial life, including an IRS audit that he's currently undergoing. And also, if he's not in power, he can't use his position of power in order to violate the Emoluments Clause and financially enrich himself and his companies. So the New York Times found that records show that starting in 2010, Donald Trump claimed and received an income tax refund totaling $72.9 million, all the federal income tax he had paid for 2009 through 2008, plus interest. The legitimacy of that refund is at the center of the audit battle that he has long been waging out of the public view with the IRS. So he might have to pay a ton of money pretty soon if he's found guilty in that tax audit of committing tax fraud and deducting things that he should not have deducted. For instance, his revenue from The Apprentice and from licensing deals is drying up. And several years ago, he sold nearly all the stocks that now might have helped him plug holes in his struggling properties. Within the next 4 years, more than $300 million in loans, obligations for which he's personally responsible for, will come due, right? So he's got this tax audit situation. He's got an insane amount of debt that is going to be due to his debtors very, very soon. And staying in power could help him influence how this all plays out for him. I have more details, including just one more graphic for you, Cenk, because I think it's really important. When it comes to the money that he's made through The Apprentice, I mean, it's kind of amazing. Remember, he inherited more than $413 million from his daddy, okay? He also went bankrupt 6 different times. But that's not the end of it. We've also learned through this reporting how much money he made from The Apprentice, which is, just go back and watch that show. It like blows my mind that he's made this kind of money off of that awful show. But The Apprentice, along with licensing and endorsement deals that flowed from his expanding celebrity, brought Trump a total of $427.4 million. He invested much of that in a collection of businesses, mostly golf courses, that in the years since have steadily devoured cash, much as the money he secretly received from his father financed a spree of overspending that led to his collapse in the early 1990s. So through, enriching himself through the office of the presidency, he's able to make up for the loss of income that he used to receive from The Apprentice. So he is using this position of power to make money, and that could be very relevant, especially when you consider this giant amount of debt that will come due very soon. $300 million worth of debt.
It's actually a little bit more than that. So let me break it down in this couple of ways. So first of all, there's the myth of meritocracy in America. And I believe there is some meritocracy, but the mythology is that if you are rich, that means by definition, you merit that wealth. Now, understand that Donald Trump, as Anna explained to you, got $413 million from his daddy. and blew it all. He lost it all in 6 different bankruptcies. Then he basically inherited $420 some odd million from Jeff Zucker, who's the current head of CNN, but at the time was head of the NBC, and gave him The Apprentice show. And then he blew that $400 million. So if you did not burn through $800 million, you're an infinitely better businessman than Donald Trump. When the dust settles, I think there's an excellent chance that he'll be considered literally the worst businessman in American history. So almost no project that he himself manages has ever made money. It's incredible. Statistically, a monkey would do better. 25% of the time, they'd be like, they just move things around in a way where they'd get lucky, right? Trump is so incompetent that everything he touches is, as one of our members just says, I think it was Gabby Marita, tyt.com/join to become a member, just said he's got reverse Midas touch. Everything he touched turns to crap. So, and as I look through all the details, guys, I mean, I run a business here. God help us. It's a small business. It's powered by you guys. But at least we've stayed afloat for 18 years. And so I know what P&Ls look like. I know what spreadsheets, et cetera, and how you've got to do to actually run the core of a business. And as I looked at those numbers, I thought, why didn't he just cut his losses? Every year he loses money, a stunning amount of money. He's lost 150 million, no, over three. I'm sorry, I got the 55 million from the Trump Hotel in DC, 315 million from the golf courses. But to me, as I saw year after year, like 25 million, 50 million, 15 million, 35 million, all losses, I kept thinking, sell it, just sell it. Why do you keep losing money? You're the worst businessman in the world. So because of all of that, he now has $421 million in loans that are coming due. And they're coming due at different times. On top of that, he has a $72 million that he owes the US government. Now, right now, the IRS seems to have that case on pause because he's literally their boss. Okay, but the minute he steps out of office, the U.S. government's going to say, you owe us $72 million, which you haven't paid now in almost 8 years. You robbed us that long ago. By the way, when you rob the U.S. government, who do you rob? You rob all of us. The American taxpayers put that money in. Trump took out $72 million he shouldn't have taken out and bragged about it. Michael Cohen's on record several times saying, yeah, he thought the IRS and basically taxpayers were schmucks for ever giving him that money. And then on top of that, he's got a $100 million loan coming due in 2022 that he couldn't possibly pay. So when you put all of it together over the next 4 years, he's got about $500 million in loans and penalties that are coming due. By the way, the $72 million, once you add the interest, comes out to about $100 million. He just doesn't have the money. He's broke. A friend of mine texted me today and said, Cenk, you've never been more right than when you did that loser Donald segment about Trump before the 2016 elections. Remember, we did 100 days in a row, and I showed you what a terrible, terrible businessman he was. And I realize now, people thought, oh, you're biased. You're trying to get him to lose. No, I was just accurately reporting how terrible he is in business even before we saw the recent numbers. Already so much of it was public. The 6 bankruptcies, the casinos he trashed, the airlines, everything he touched, he ruined. So, guys, that's why he's in a cold sweat panic. It's not that he's worried about getting arrested. Democrats couldn't arrest Ted Bundy. They couldn't arrest Dahmer. Okay, they're the most incompetent people you've ever met. And he's not worried. I don't think he's worried so much about losing power because he never intended to become president in the first place. It turns out he's worried the minute he loses the power of the presidency, it affects his finances, and he'll be dead broke and humiliated. That's why he's trying to hold on to power desperately.
Right. And also, again, while he's in power, he makes a lot of money by funneling, business toward his companies. We're seeing some of the specific numbers. For instance, this is a long graphic, but it gives you details into how much money goes toward his businesses simply because he is president. At the Mar-a-Lago Club in Palm Beach, Florida, for instance, there was a flood of new members starting in 2015, and that allowed him to pocket an additional $5 million a year from the business. And remember, people were trying to become members of Mar-a-Lago in order to have influence over Trump. I mean, Trump's there all the time. And so if you want face-to-face interaction with Trump and you want to lobby or influence him in some way, it's an easy way to do it. At his Doral Golf Resort near Miami, the roofing materials manufacturer GAF spent at least $1.5 million in 2018, even as its industry was lobbying the Trump administration to roll back egregious federal regulations. They refer to it as egregious, of course. In 2017, the Billy Graham Evangelistic Association paid at least $397,602 to the Washington Hotel, where the group held at least one event during its 4-day World Summit in defense of persecuted Christians. And then finally, here's some more numbers for you. When he took office, Trump said that he would pursue no new foreign deals as president. Even so, in his first 2 years in the White House, his revenue from abroad totaled $73 million. And while much of that money was from his golf properties in Scotland and Ireland, some came from licensing deals in countries with authoritarian-leaning leaders or thorny geopolitics. For example, $3 million from the Philippines, $2.3 million from India, and $1 million from Turkey. So look, you're the president of the United States and you're still very much vested in the best interests of your own businesses. And so you're going to use that powerful position to funnel money to your organizations and to your companies. This is, I mean, it's not what the president is supposed to do. He's supposed to be a public servant, but Trump has done the exact opposite. He has not served as a public servant. I think the more than 200,000 Americans who are dead today as a result of his incompetence and lack of leadership with regard to the pandemic is just one piece of evidence to that.
Yeah, so he's got loans from a couple of different places, including this company called Ladder, which is a lender of last resort for people who are out of options because they're toxic, because they can't run a business. And so when he gets out of office, companies like Ladder are not soft. They will come in and go, yes, we're now, if you've ever played Monopoly, it's actually pretty close to that. If you don't have the money, which he most certainly does not, we will now take control of your properties. So they're gone. And so he'll have to sell potentially Mar-a-Lago and the others to try to pay his bills and still not have enough money. Meg wrote in, Cenk, if he's answering my question, and why doesn't he just sell the stuff? And if he has to sell it later under duress, he's going to get even a lower number. Meg said, Cenk, if he sold the golf courses in his name, then his name would get taken off the front of them. He's that much of a child. Meg, oh my God, I think you're right. I think that is what's happening. So by the way, tyt.com/join and become a member. Or you could do what these folks just did. You could hit the join button below if you're watching on YouTube. That's Xavier Lee, Jesse Tapia, Aaron Walker, and Rulian Estevaletti. Thank you guys for all just joining up right now. But at the end of the day, I can't see a way that he wouldn't be broke. He got bailed out by Deutsche Bank once before. He appears to have gotten bailed out by the Russians, according to his sons, who said that they got the money from the Russians for the golf courses. But now under this giant spotlight, I mean, if he loses the presidency, it would be shocking if anyone else ever gave him a loan again. And if you're out of loans, you got to break up your hotels and your properties. You got to sell them off at reduced prices. And he's in more trouble than you could possibly imagine because he just cannot make money. And the most important part, The Apprentice money has run dry. So he made money on that by appearing on it for 14 seasons and getting the licensing off of that. But that money's almost all out now. And that leads to the final point here. There's no one in the country that helped Donald Trump become president more than Jeff Zucker. This story absolutely shows that. If it wasn't for the $420 some odd million he made from The Apprentice, he would have been broke, I guess now 16 years ago. Dead broke, totally humiliated. They would have called his loans at that point. It's The Apprentice that kept him in business. And Jeff Zucker, at the time ran NBC, started Apprentice, gave Donald Trump this money through hiring him to be a host. And then at CNN, if you remember a couple of weeks ago, a story came out where there was tapes of Zucker talking to Michael Cohen, who was Trump's lawyer at the time, saying, now here's how I can help Donald Trump win the debate on CNN. And remember, if he loses, I want to do a TV deal with him. So the head of CNN was helping Trump all along and gave him hundreds of millions of dollars in basically free media advertising back in 2016. And if it wasn't for that $400 million, he would have been a goner. So Jeff Zucker, that he now calls fake news, actually is his second daddy. If it weren't for his two daddies, he never would have made a single dollar, and he'd probably be homeless right now.
Let's take our final break. When we come back, we have more news for you, and you don't want to miss it. We'll see you then.
Are you a politician with a ridiculous point to make? Are you in need of a petulant, outdated way to make it? Then you'll need one of my signs. Hi, I'm Simon Simonson of Simonson Signs. We'll take the stupid, over-the-top, meaningless allegory you have and put it on foam core. So maybe someone will notice your grandstanding. Because this is C-SPAN, and anything that's not people milling around in front of a running vote count is almost considered moderately entertaining. The bar is low, just like our prices. We've got plenty of designs. We also brought you Mike Lee's Tauntauns. They're tons of fun. What does this have to do with the Green New Deal? About as much as this other visual aid he used of Reagan on a T-Rex. Or is that a Velociraptor? Who cares? Who the cares? No one gives a call us now at Simon Simonson Signs. We'll make your stupid point stupidly for money today.
Viewers had asked for an interview with the TYT Lizard. Mr. Lizard. Oh, you changed colors today. Nice. I don't even know how you feel about us. Do you even like us?
Well, you guys made me this awesome house, so I'm kind of in your debt. I was found outside on the street, and you gave me a home. Granted, it was a really crappy home for a while, but then through the power of fundraising, I became a person who has a multi-level Trump-style mansion.
You do. By the way, you've never looked better, man. Normally, you're just green or just brown, but today you're in mid-lizard, right?
I'm not very smart. I'm a lizard, so I don't know how the science works. I guess this is just my mood. It's not every day that thresholds like this are broken. I'm just so excited. I can't contain my pigmentation.
And now you're showing it off.
Yep.
Yeah, I've never seen the lizard like this before.
That's 300 million. That's a pretty good number. We were doing a press release on it, and I got all worked up. And I said, okay, well, that's the size of the U.S. population. You know what our next target is? The size of the entire world on the road to 6 billion. Although by the time we hit it, it'll probably be 7, maybe 8 billion.
Not a big deal. A couple of days ago on the TYT network, we passed 1 billion views.
What the hell?
What the hell?
That's a big freaking deal.
2 billion views.
What now?
Sorry.
What did we do? 2 billion?
2 billion.
They said it couldn't be done, but it was done.
We just crossed 5 billion views on YouTube.
I mean, imagine 10 years ago thinking, one day.
We looked at you like, are you nuts? Young Turks crosses 6 billion views. Young Turks has just passed another milestone, 10 billion views.
Damn.
I just shot a clip. It's time sensitive and it needs to be edited right now.
Did anybody call for an editor?
Need this in an hour.
But you're an editor too.
All right, back on the Young Turks. First of all, thank you to our sponsor, Aspiration. Unlike the dirty banks, they're a clean, progressive financial institution. Put your money where your heart is. Aspiration.com/TYT. Did I just make up that slogan? Yes. Burrito Bandito writes in the member section, TYT should ask Deutsche Bank for a loan. No, Deutsche Bank used to be this is a German bank. Used to be a very legitimate bank. They've totally ruined their reputation by dealing with all these thugs and criminals and oligarchs and drug lords, etc. So no, they're not going to give us a loan. We don't do anything criminal. TYT.com/go is our only hope. And it's a good hope. It's a wonderful hope. Let's see the thermometer, which we haven't seen in a while. We're near the end of this month, guys. And again, this month, it looks like we're probably not going to make it. It's 90,000. We're trying to get to 200,000 by the end of each month. Miraculously, we made it every month. This is just 10% of what billionaires give PragerU as an example. If we get to 200,000, if you can help at TYT.com/go, it would be amazing. Thank you. Megan Lay 1 writes in the member section, currently watching you guys and simultaneously on hold with the IRS because they've held mine and my husband's refund since March. If only I were a millionaire. Unfortunately, exactly right. And then 2 new members on YouTube, Pamela Charshi and Moist Toilettes. So that's funny. Hit the join button below on YouTube if you want to join. Nikki Dearest Gogo says, I would any chance of getting #2strongcoffee in biodegradable K-Pods? That would be fabulous. Love you guys. TYT gives me hope in these dark days. Not yet, but we are actually working on it, and we're trying to be as progressive as possible. That's why it's organic. It's fair trade. After the second bag, it gives money to progressive causes like Just Democrats and Wolfpack. After the third bag, you get this mug, 2strongcoffee.com/TYT. But actually go to 2strongcoffee.com/win for the next couple of days, because you could also win a year's worth of free coffee. So please check that out. And I want to give a shout out to Twitch, where Tails420 gifted 10 subs. That's their 90th gift. OB Mom's a legend at 803 gifted subs to the channel. And lastly, Lieutenant McG donated 800 bits for, quote, Anna, because she rocks. You can share with Jank, he wrote. Okay, so back to the person who rocks.
Thank you. Thank you. I enjoy your bits. All right, so let's talk about the Supreme Court. So, Democrats really don't get enough credit for the things they're really, really good at, like how they're good at failing at messaging or losing. And I think what's happening with the Supreme Court right now, and the Supreme Court nominee, Amy Coney Barrett, is a perfect example of that. Now, keep in mind that Democrats have avoided talking about this rigged economic system we're living under because they're basically funded by the same corporate donors as Republicans. So instead, they've shifted 100% of their messaging toward identity politics. It's just the truth. It just is. And so since everything they do hinges on identity politics, they're in a bit of a pickle with Amy Coney Barrett, a woman who is successful and has 7 kids, one of whom I should say, was adopted from Haiti, and the other has Down syndrome. So what are Democrats going to do to attack her? Are they going to attack her religion? Are they going to attack her because she has so many children? That's not going to play so well. And so this video emerged over the weekend. An NBC News reporter tweeted it, and you see her coming out of her home with all her kids. And not just one, many Republicans on Twitter, including the one I'm about to share with you, tweeted this: good luck, Democrats. Because again, they really can't focus on identity politics here, because in terms of identity politics, she appears to be squeaky clean. And again, you might have problems with her religion, but attacking her religion is a loser, right? So now we're hearing that Senate Democrats recognize the danger. A top Democratic strategist pointed to 3 pitfalls: liberals mishandling this by boycotting or treating her with disrespect; Senator Dianne Feinstein, top Democrat on the Judiciary Committee, screwing it up, which she's also very, very good at; and someone looking like a religious bigot. So they're stuck. They don't know what to do. And to be quite honest with you, the procedural methods that they have to try to delay a vote on Amy Coney Barrett won't go far enough in preventing her from getting confirmed. There's been some talk about boycotting the confirmation hearing. That's just going to speed up the process. That means Republicans are just going to vote yes, and you guys are done. So they've bungled everything. And it's not just, you can't just take this as an isolated instance, right? They bungled it with decades of poor decisions, and those poor decisions were funded by corporate donors who want them to focus on issues that matter to some extent. There's no question, like issues of racism, sexism, homophobia, those issues matter. But if those are the only issues that you focus on, identity-related issues, and you allow financial crimes to go by the wayside, corruption to go by the wayside, all of the other issues that Amy Coney Barrett has because she's a pro-corporate judge, well, then you don't really have anything to attack her on, because you're not allowed to attack the fact that she's going to side with corporations over average Americans over and over again, just like all the other corporate judges that have been appointed by Republicans.
Okay, so let me tell you the things that are not going to work, and then I want to be realistic with you guys about what the options they have are, and then tell you why they're not going to do them. So first of all, the things that aren't going to work are boycotting so that none of the Democrats show up in the hearings. How does that make any sense? Will that slow it down? No, it's just oh yeah, we're just not going to dignify the process. Totally, utterly useless. I don't know who came up with that ridiculous idea. No, in fact, it'll make it go quicker. I'm not interested in your theatrics. I'm interested in you actually stopping her from getting on the court. Secondly, apparently some people talking about her family. I don't even understand the point. By the way, she has 2 kids she adopted from Haiti. So the whole point of being pro-choice is you get to choose how big or small your family is. So that's bizarre. So don't get into her family. That's dumb. Okay. Now, on to things that actually could work. First of all, they say that, oh, there's nothing we can do. Dick Durbin said we could slow it down, perhaps hours, maybe days at most. Okay, so he's ready to surrender. I'm going to get to his second quote in a second. That's not true. I laid out for you guys last week 5 different things that could significantly slow down the process, if not stop it altogether. But so far, Democrats have taken 4 out of those 5 options off the table already. And now they're saying basically the 5th option, where we slow things down, nah, we're not even going to do that. They're just such losers. And what drives me crazy about the rest of the media is now they're all dutifully reporting, just like I told you on day 1, there's nothing they can do. That's not true. There's 5 procedures they can do. They're choosing not to do them. And then, so then Durbin says, but we can't stop the outcome. What we should do is to address this now respectfully. In other words, lose with civility. I loathe these Democrats. I can't stand them. He's the number 2 Democrat in the Senate. They're going to lose respectfully. By the way, oh, what good would it do to delay it by a couple of days? Do you know when right now the current schedule, which is the fastest that the Republicans could possibly go, has them taking a full vote of the Senate on October 26th? That's only a week before the elections. Could you delay it by a week doing the procedures I laid out last week? Absolutely. But they're cowards and feckless, and they're the worst. So they're not going to do any of that. And so, and will they challenge her on Citizens United? She's going to make Citizens United permanent. The country despises Citizens United. Nope, they're going to lay down like dogs, because they are dogs to their donors. They're not even going to fight on that issue. So, and then finally, look, on this religion issue, no, don't go and attack her for being Catholic. That doesn't make any sense. And the Republicans with their false thing about, oh my God, how could a Catholic suffer all this kind of bigotry and discrimination? They just don't want any Catholics on the Supreme Court. She would be the 6th Catholic on the Supreme Court. And Gorsuch was raised a Catholic, so it's possible that it would be 7 out of the 9 justices that are Catholic. So what discrimination are you guys talking about? On which planet? What, do you want 9 out of 9 to be Catholic? That's insane. But yes, I would ask her. She literally has a handmaid. They changed the name recently, but that is what it is. And according to her sect, she is supposed to ask her for advice on all decisions. So is she going to ask her handmaid for help on Supreme Court decisions? If so, we really got to meet the handmaid and find out if she's qualified too. So, but they won't do any of that. Durbin just told you they will lay down respectfully. The Democrats sicken me.
Well, look, they're going to lay down respectfully because they refuse to attack her where it makes sense to attack her. The pro-corporate, ideology is an issue, but it's an issue that the Democratic Party has as well. I mean, they've sided with corporations as well, and they know that making that argument is going to upset their donors. But on top of that, look, like they're just, even if they wanted to attack her correctly on the issues that matter, they're so bad at it. They're so rusty at it. I mean, look, if you want to be good with your donors, you can just focus on the one issue that I think is the least likely to play out well for Americans, and that's the Affordable Care Act. Amy Coney Barrett is going to help repeal the Affordable Care Act. People aren't going to have healthcare protections that were given to them through that legislation. Yes, that legislation, that law, ended up being incredibly flawed for a number of reasons that we've repeated on this show several times. But there are still important protections, like protections for people with pre-existing conditions, which will be gone as soon as the Affordable Care Act is completely repealed. And that is going to be a disaster, especially at a time when we're still dealing with a pandemic. We're seeing numbers of coronavirus cases increase in dozens of states again. And we're about to enter flu season. We're about to enter the winter. When the holidays happen, when people are going to gather, they're not going to care about listening to social distancing guidelines. We're really in for it. And so that is an easy line of attack against Amy Coney Barrett. And I don't know why they're not effectively using that line of attack and instead talking about the size of her family. Who cares about the size of her family? I don't care about her personal decisions. I also don't want her personal choices to impact or dictate the lives of other women. So you want to attack her on what she could possibly do to reproductive rights? That makes sense as well. But you got to frame it correctly. You got to frame it strategically and not give Republicans ammo to then turn around and say that the Democratic Party is full of religious bigots. Because quite honestly, some of the rhetoric and discourse I've seen online does make them seem like religious bigots, and it's not a good look, especially when they've put everything into identity politics for decades now.
But Anna, look, even if they did the Affordable Care Act thing, which I'd be surprised if they didn't go to that well eventually. I mean, how incompetent can they be? But honestly, at the end of the day, that isn't going to matter at all because we're not trying to win a vote here. She doesn't have to win a popularity contest. All the Republican senators that they need have already declared loyalty to her. She's going to win the vote.
We need to get those senators out, though.
But by that time, it'll be too late. They'll have a 6-3 majority for the next 30, 40 years. It's over. It's over for the Supreme Court. And so, given how they stole the Merrick Garland seat, because they said it was a year before the election, you got to let the people decide. This one, they're going to fill literally a week before the election. If you can't pull out every procedural stop to block that, you're losers. So I told you, you could block the debt ceiling, you could block continuing resolutions, you could call for impeachment after impeachment, which with the taxes story is easy. You could threaten to expand the courts, and you could actually deliver on that threat. The Democrats have taken all that off the table already because they're epic losers. But the last one is asking for unanimous consent on every vote. Can it slow it down by about a week? Maybe you could, but you got to start right now. Why are you letting the Republicans do any votes in the Senate? No, ask for unanimous consent, make them come in the building and break and get 51 votes for every single vote, for every post office, for everything they have to do between now and the election. Take them off of their campaign circuit, to make them stop going to donor fundraisers, and they'll panic. But the Democrats don't want to do that because they also don't want to stop going on that donor circuit, because they also have elections and they also are money grubbing, awful politicians. So they're going to let her walk onto the Supreme Court. And from then on, everybody will always lie to you that there was nothing the Democrats could do. And that is nothing but a lie. They're choosing for the billionth time in a row not to fight. I can't stand them.
All right, postgame is next. tyt.com/join. Become a member. See you there.
We're very honest that we're progressives. We call the Young Turks home of progressives, and we support progressive candidates.
There has been this reemergence of political activism, especially among young people.
This weekend was the second Women's March, both across the U.S. and across the world. So these people are not simply marching, they're not simply talking, they're also running for office. And when they do run, they're going to make a difference.
Joe Crowley is congressman from New York. He's very powerful. Why? He raised a lot of money. But there's someone finally challenging him.
We need to have representation that advocates as fiercely for working class people as possible from this seat.
If candidates like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez even get a little bit of media attention outside of what the Young Turks does, they have an excellent chance of winning.
She's going to win. She's going to win. 68% reporting.
The majority of Americans want Medicare for all. So I don't care what you and your corporate cronies want. What I care about is what the American people want.
We believe in total change. Everything runs on donor money. And that is what we will fight, and that is exactly why they don't like us.
We're having fun. It's election night.
Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez has defeated Joe Crowley.
Here we go again.
Ladies and gentlemen, we got him.
Down goes Crowley. Down goes Crowley. Down goes Manafort. Down goes Cohen.
Women came out in record numbers in the primaries.
They said you'll be lucky to get one candidate. We now have 12 that have won their primaries.
Bezos and Amazon announcing that they are going to go to a 15-hour minimum wage.
We're making progress. Let's keep going.
Many of these women made history.
The biggest victories, all women of color. Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar, Sharice Davids and Deb Haaland.
And I want to go to Congress because I want to change those things.
I'm calling it. Jamal Bowman has won. Down goes Engel. Down goes Engel.
For a long time, we have not had progressives in power. It's going to be something to behold.
Welcome to the Happy Half Hour, everybody. After a week of soul-crushing news, we break out the good stuff. Good news, good videos, good people, and, of course, drink good alcohol. That's the worst thing I've ever had.
This
That's
is the best show.
Full disclosure, we did do a shot right before the show began. It says, let's flamingo.
Flamingo.
The reason you had trouble with that word is it's not a word. Okay. This is the one of everything.
I've got a rash. Could I just put it on that to see if it'll take it off?
What did you used to think this was?
Bull piss.
Drink it, swallow it,
No.
spit it. Oh, that's needed after a day like this. Cheers to Brett Ehrlich. Climax. Uranus smells like farts. Because of course it does. This is the worst sketch ever of a perp. But guess what, ladies and gentlemen? They found the guy. This is Sophie's super happy dog story of the week.
This dog is so precious and deserves the world. I'm just not drinking that beer.
Here's my dog. This is Onyx.
Yeah, I would just say that he's exotic because he's not your traditional dog. Still 12 out of 10 because they're all good.
Well, if that made you happy, just wait till you see the best thing ever of the week. There is a woman who moves like a horse.
Why do I want to go home and like try this?
We're actually going to show you the running butthole challenge right now. What's happening? No, that's just wrong. Every way. And we'll see you next time.
Hey, Dave. As you can probably see, Skype froze. Frozen crashed.
You know, I'm watching that documentary on the Vietnam War, and there was a TV journalist in the middle of some tiny little village in Vietnam doing live TV as the soldiers were burning the Vietnamese huts, and it didn't crash. And that was 1965, and he was in Vietnam.
All right, back on the Young Turks. I want to read just one member comment. Jenny Penny wrote in, so I really don't understand how a business like casinos and golf courses can lose so much money, even if they're managed by Trump. We know he uses undocumented workers to pay slave wages. We know he consistently refused to pay contractors. I truly think the biggest crime he's committing is money laundering with the help of Deutsche Bank and dictators. So I hear you on all that, and I've talked a lot about the money laundering, and you're thinking, but how? Everybody who runs casinos makes money. I mean, there's literally a saying, the house always wins. And apparently they made so much money in Vegas that even though almost no one is going to those casinos for the last 6 months, they're still not out of business. They had unbelievable reserves. So how did Trump lose money in his casinos? He built 3 casinos in the same town. Everybody told him not to do it. You're cannibalizing your own businesses. And he's like, no, I'm going to put Trump even bigger on the next casino. Because he's a child and he wanted to see his name in lights. And for the Taj Mahal, he took out money at an interest rate of 14%. Good night, Irene. If you have ever run a business or gotten any loan for your house, for your car, for anything, 14% for a business over the long term is not doable. Nobody could make enough money practically, especially someone as dumb as Donald Trump, to pay back a 14% interest rate. And again, he was warned, don't take out that kind of risky loan. You won't be able to pay it back. He's like, no, I got it. It'll be great. I'll put Trump even bigger and it'll be wonderful. No, he ruined all of it, bankrupted all 3 casinos. I've never heard of or read about a businessman as bad as Donald Trump. I'm not kidding and I'm not exaggerating. All right, Casper.
All right. So someone just sent me a story about how Donald Trump's 2016 campaign had a deterrence program to prevent Black Americans from voting. So I hear you guys. I see the story. Hopefully you're not one of these Tulsi Gabbard people who are bringing up the story and I'm acknowledging it and saying we're going to cover it, just so you can then trash me on Twitter. I actually think this is an interesting story. I hadn't seen it until this moment. We will cover it. I just wanted to let the members know I just saw that story. With that said, let's move on to what we have produced for the show today. Brad Parscale, one of Donald Trump's campaign workers, used to be a campaign manager, is in some trouble. So the wife of Trump campaign official Brad Parscale called the authorities in Broward County, Florida last night because he was causing harm to himself, or at least threatening to cause harm to himself, and could have possibly caused harm to her as well. So we now have body camera footage of what happened. The police did show up. They did apprehend him. His wife, Candace, is also in the body camera footage. And what's noticeable is that she seems to have some injuries on her arms. We'll give you some more details on that in just a second. But this is what the scene looked like when cops arrived and apprehended him.
So she started saying, "Oh, hey,
get on the ground, man. Get on the ground. Get on the ground.
get on the ground, man." Jesus, I didn't do anything. I didn't do anything. I didn't do anything.
Stay down. Hands behind back.
Hey, we'll figure it all out, right? Don't worry about it. I didn't do anything. I didn't do anything.
We're gonna get you off the ground in just a second, okay? Is there any weapons on you like that?
No, wait, I don't have any weapons. I didn't do anything.
We're gonna get you off the ground, boys.
Okay, yes, I'll get up. Okay, good. I didn't do anything.
So let me give you more details, then we can comment on this. So Candace, again, that's his wife. Candace, who had several large-sized contusions on both of her arms, her cheek and forehead, later told cops that Parscale had hit her previously and that he did forcibly smack her phone out of her hand when she was attempting to call his father on Sunday, according to the police report. He came out of his office, cocked a gun, Candace says on the police video. He's acting crazy, going irate. After Brad Parscale loaded the round, Candace Parscale immediately fled the residence and stated she heard a loud bang shortly after, the report said. And a statement from the Fort Lauderdale police report indicates, however, they were concerned that Bradley might still try to shoot himself. So that was, where he had, according to his wife, threatened to commit suicide. And once she noticed that he was loading the gun, that was when she ran out of the house, called the authorities, and then you saw what happened afterwards.
So I watched the whole video, and you see her calmly talking to the cops, but explaining the story, and then they call him and try to get him out of the house, and they eventually do get him out of the house. He comes out originally with a Bud Light, it looks like, and the reason they tackled him is because apparently at that point they noticed the bruises on his wife, and they said later that they thought there might have been a bulge in his shorts, I'm being literal, and thought it might be a gun. And so to be safe, they tackled him. Now, do I think they needed to tackle him? Honestly, no. He appeared to be cooperative at that point. I think that if they tried to put the handcuffs on him without tackling him, he very likely would have let them handcuff him. And I didn't see any bulge. I wasn't looking for a bulge, but the idea that he might have had a gun sounds. I mean, you saw the video. I would have been very surprised by that. Do I shed a tear for him after he apparently hit his wife? No, I don't shed a tear for him. And was Trump's campaign manager and is still a Trump campaign official. Do I shed a tear for him going, I didn't do anything wrong? Yeah, neither did thousands of black men and women across this country on video, let alone the millions overall, that have been tackled by cops, beaten by cops, etc. And you ran a campaign where you mocked them, where you didn't give a damn about them. Then all of a sudden when it happens to you, you're like, but I didn't do anything wrong. You forgot a sentence, and I'm white. And so sad day for you that cops also used excessive force on you. Now, this is the point where we're supposed to show sympathy because apparently he was thinking of harming himself. Well, I don't know that. And it's going to be awfully hard to muster up sympathy for a guy like Parscale. If he'd actually done it, I guess I would have, had some degree of sympathy. But so why? Why is he apparently so distraught? Well, there's two giant possibilities. One is that there's now been all these stories about how he bought himself Ferraris and Range Rovers and all these apartments with the money that was sent for Trump's campaign. Did he do anything illegal there? I mean, if I was authorities, I'd look into it. But he's in Florida, where you have a Republican governor. So, and stealing from Trump donors, those are the suckers that they all steal from. So I doubt that he would be in trouble for that. Now, the other possibility is we just saw in the New York Times taxes story that Donald Trump has a lot of questionable expenses. 5 times as much expenses on his properties as before he got elected president. Is he unloading some of those expenses to be repaid by either the U.S. taxpayers or his campaign? And are they real expenses, or is it padding the numbers to funnel money back into the Trump organization? We don't know. Was Parscale involved in that? We don't know, but he was the campaign manager. But as that story comes out on the same day, and he might not have seen that story at all, we don't know. And we do know all the stories that came out about him, and he was demoted. There's certainly plenty of reasons for him to be distraught, and none of those reasons makes me shed a tear. So he's right now, last we heard, he was in the hospital, admitted against his own will, because he threatened to do harm to himself, apparently, according to his wife, and he has been arrested. And we'll see if he suffers any consequences for apparently hitting his wife.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with you. I have no sympathy for him whatsoever, not even a little bit. And I'd like to make a prediction. I'm not exactly sure when it's going to happen. I would assume soon. Donald Trump will throw him under the bus so hard. And he will definitely find ways to blame Brad Parscale for whatever financial crimes his campaign engaged in, or whatever financial crimes he engaged in, period, while serving as president. I have no doubt. He throws people close to him, people who have carried water for him, under the bus over and over again. And to be honest with you, I can't wait for it to happen. Yeah. Look, bad people, bad things happen to bad people. right? Every once in a while, like there's an example that still happens where bad people suffer consequences. And I'm not going to pretend like, oh my gosh, wow, let me have some sympathy for this guy who enables the criminality that we see from Donald Trump on a regular basis. More than 200 people died during this pandemic. How many people of color, both black and brown, have died because of police brutality that people like Brad Parscale have completely supported, completely defended? Kyle Rittenhouse shoots and kills 2 people in Kenosha, Wisconsin. And what did people like Brad Parscale do? They defended him, right? Yeah, I don't shed a tear at all for Brad Parscale. Don't really care that much about this story, other than the fact that it makes me feel good to know that sometimes bad people suffer consequences. That's it.
Well, at least in him getting tackled, I guess that was a cathartic moment. But since he's white, wealthy now, so all the money he got from the campaign, he wasn't before. All the money came from the campaign. He was just a rando guy. Before he started working for the Trump organization, so all of his money came from the campaign. So he's wealthy, white, and a right winger. So is he going to actually go to jail for assaulting his wife, or potentially, if they find criminality in his financial misdealings? I still say very unlikely.
Yeah, I agree. All right, well, let's move on to other news, because this is something I've been wanting to address for a little while. It has to do with Nancy Pelosi's challenger, Shahid Buttar, and this ongoing narrative about him that's been driving me crazy. So a few months ago, The Intercept published a thinly sourced and unevidenced report alleging that Nancy Pelosi's progressive challenger, Shahid Buttar, was mistreating his campaign workers. Now, based on what I read in the original reporting, I really couldn't find what the issue was. Anything that could potentially be an issue, again, didn't really provide the type of corroboration I would have liked to see. And the complaints that I was hearing from his now former staffers seemed to be embellished a little bit, okay? And now it turns out that, yeah, a lot of it was embellished. And maybe the left needs to be a little smarter in not taking the bait when people come out with their, smear campaigns or their ridiculous embellished grievances. And so Akilah Lacey, to her credit, has updated the story on The Intercept, and I want to share what those updates are. So she writes that the debate over Buttar's campaign was promoted by a draft resolution circulated by the San Francisco chapter of the DSA, or DSA San Francisco, in late July, moving to rescind the chapter's endorsement and calling on Buttar to participate in a restorative justice process within the chapter, of which he and several of his current and former staffers were members. The DSA San Francisco draft resolution led to other local political groups also reconsidering their endorsements of the campaign or the candidate, a process that has fractured San Francisco's leftist circles. Because leftists are really good at fighting one another. They're really good at that. Like the nonstop competition of who's the most moral one always takes priority over winning. Just keeping it real, okay? You guys can go ahead and hate on me for saying it, but it is demonstrably true. It was true in the way Alex Morse was completely abandoned as soon as there were any accusations against him, and that destroyed his candidacy. It's true of this case. It was true of you, Cenk. You got dropped like in a second as soon as, establishment Democrats put out their attacks on you. And I think it's pathetic because we need to think about what the actual priorities are here. And it should be winning. It should be winning, primarying corporate Democrats, getting them the hell out, and actually having effective leaders in Congress. That should be the priority. But instead, let's go ahead and fight one another over who's more moral. Okay, let me move on.
But can I just say real quick before you move on, but that even gives them too much credit because they want to claim moral superiority, but they actually don't have the facts to back it up. Alex Morse was totally smeared, and it was a homophobic smear. He actually had done nothing wrong. As you'll see in the details of Shahid's case, he has done nothing wrong. So no, you're not morally superior for destroying progressive candidates and helping the right wing or the establishment do that. I would say quite the opposite. And then they'll get really, really emotional about that. I was trying to be morally superior to you. Are you claiming that you're morally superior to me? How dare you? I'm the one who gets to lord that over you, etc. No, I don't believe it. And I think that the right wing couldn't ask for better allies than
100%.
so-called people on the left who help these smears take on. I mean, look, you want to talk about me? Oh my God, you wrote something 18 years ago when you were a Republican. Ha ha! I am morally superior to you. Oh, congratulations. How about the last 18 years where I've helped every progressive in the world as much as I could possibly do? I don't care. This makes me feel good. I don't want those progressives' help if it turns out I could feel morally superior to someone by trashing a fellow progressive. But look, I'm the least important of all of these because it turns out that, especially in my election, I wasn't close. It wouldn't have mattered. In this case, it was DSA, by the way, just those tiny little asterisks on this, couldn't make up their mind between me and a corporate Democrat that took money from drug companies, backed Nancy Pelosi 100%. What kind of a socialist can't make up their mind between a corporate hack and a guy who's been doing a progressive show for 18 years featuring every progressive there is in the country? So again,
no, but Cenk, no, I got to interrupt you, but you're not understanding this, okay? But you wrote very offensive blogs 20 years ago. And, these people aren't public figures and they don't know what it's like to have everything they've ever done in their entire life looked at, dissected, judged. But I'm positive that if they were investigated and vetted that way, that they would be perfect human beings. And they've never done or said anything even remotely offensive. I got to keep going because I don't want to get too stuck on one thing. There's more to this story that you guys need to know about. So what ended up happening with the DSA? Well, DSA San Francisco ultimately passed a resolution in a virtual meeting on August 4th that stripped out the accusations regarding Buttar's mistreatment of staff and the alleged sexual misconduct. I'll get to that in just a second. The amended resolution simply said that DSA San Francisco had lost confidence in the management of Buttar's campaign and in Shahid Buttar as a candidate that represents our values. If you look at him as a candidate and what he represents policy-wise, it is hard to buy that argument, okay? But the reason why they changed the statement here is because it turns out that the accusations against him, especially the sexual assault allegation, was without merit. It couldn't be corroborated. The Intercept itself went out of its way to try to corroborate it. They couldn't. The allegation was by a woman named Elizabeth Croydon. After the allegations came out, a number of people who had been close to her said that she is not to be trusted with these types of allegations because she had made similar allegations to other people. It first started off with a sexual assault allegation, then it was changed to sexual harassment, just weird stuff that couldn't be confirmed, but nonetheless, it was originally reported about, and I'm sure it did unfortunately harm his campaign. Now, Jasper Wild, Buttar's former campaign manager, had written in a Medium post that his campaign ended due to allegations of sexual assault. The post has since been edited to replace assault with harassment. Wild said it was a mistake, and she changed the post after it was brought to her attention. Yeah, that's a pretty giant mistake, right? And then one more thing, Cenk, one more thing, and then you can go ham. Okay. The only allegation that still stands against Buttar was that he can be a tough boss, that he can get frustrated, he can yell at his staffers and berate them. And so the original allegation was that he was disproportionately harsh toward the female staffers. Based on what I've seen coming out since then, it seems as though he's just a tough boss on everyone. And more importantly, he just had a difference of opinion in regard to how the campaign needed to move forward. The staffers didn't want volunteers to work on the campaign. Buttar wanted the volunteers to work on the campaign. And so there was this constant friction and tension. And eventually the staffers left. And he continued on with his campaign in the way that he feels is fit. But the staffers continued on with these ridiculous allegations of, oh, he was tough on us. And he was especially tough on us because we're women. Yeah, he was tough on the men too, but he was especially tough on us as women. We're going to make ourselves out to be victims because we're women, even though there's evidence of him being like this toward the men as well. It's pathetic and it makes me embarrassed, honestly. Go ahead, Cenk.
So accusing someone of sexual assault is not a small mistake. So now those allegations have been completely discredited, and it turns out The Intercept is reporting that the person who made those allegations, apparently, according to someone else, did those same things to someone else, and then pretended that Shahid did it to her. So no credible person or outlet at this point believes her. Now, the problem is, once you say that, once you put it out there, now there's a seed of doubt. And when you're already a massive underdog and going up against Nancy Pelosi or Richard Neal or any of these well-entrenched establishment Democrats who are corrupt to the core, and you don't have any media to help you, all the media kiss the ass of those corporate Democrats. All it needs is a tiny little seed of doubt and you're done. And you saw it happen to Alex Morse. So now they're doing it to the person who's our only hope against Nancy Pelosi. And so now they're going to let Nancy Pelosi take it in a cakewalk because, number one, they put a doubt on a heinous charge, totally unmerited. Then they turn to, well, it was sexual harassment. Then, as Anna pointed out, I kept reading the stories. Where is it? Where is this? Give me details, evidence, examples. Because if he really did it, I don't want to support him. There's no progressive in their right mind who would support a candidate who's in favor of sexual harassment. So, okay, I'm waiting. Where is the story? Nope. It turns out, yeah, he didn't agree with our decisions. That's not sexual harassment. And when you call that sexual harassment, you're hurting the cause of women all across the world when they actually get sexually harassed. Then they're going to go, yeah, the left. They just pretend that if you don't listen to them, it's sexual harassment. Oh, you've done so much damage. You've done 100%. Untold damage. Okay. And then at the end, and as Anna pointed out, when you get into, okay, so your only thing is he's your boss and he didn't agree with you, that even though you have no goddamn experience, that he should listen to you instead of trusting his own judgment and the judgment of others. So now you want to turn that into some toxic issue to destroy him because you're bitter. Then it turns out they said, oh, well, I mean, he didn't do it unequally to women. He did it to men and women. Then what? Then what the hell's the sexual harassment part of it? God, yeah, I mean, it's unbearable. And now half the groups in San Francisco, so-called progressive groups in San Francisco, can't make up their mind about whether they should support him or not. Maybe they'll go support Nancy Pelosi, who took $720 million in corporate contributions, otherwise known as bribes, because they can't make up their mind between BS charges on an awesome progressive and a corrupt Democrat. Then you're not a progressive. You're just self-aggrandizing, trying to get attention for yourself, and you sicken me.
Yeah, and I think it's really important to read word for word what The Intercept had updated about Croydon's allegations against Buttar. So as Lacey writes in The Intercept, Croydon's claims have not been borne out. The Intercept was not able to corroborate Croydon's allegations and has interviewed multiple sources who recounted having disturbing interactions with her that caused them to question her credibility. Buttar has denied the allegations from Croydon, who claimed that Buttar verbally harassed her about celibacy and pressed himself against her at a party. Croydon's former roommate, however, Stacey Haynes, told The Intercept that the accusation sounded remarkably familiar, as it was actually Haynes who went through a period of celibacy and was mocked and harassed by Croydon for doing so.
Look, if you're a young staffer or of a campaign or a company or anything, please stop ruining it for millennials too, not just progressives. Because everybody thinks that now millennials are entitled little pricks. And you know why? It's because of rich millennials. Poor millennials and middle-class millennials are going to college and then barely getting jobs at Burger King in Nebraska. And they've got everything stacked against them, and they've got all the odds stacked against them. And we're trying to help them with all of these different things that we're proposing: college for all, Medicare for all, etc., to get desperately needed help to millennials and Gen Z. But a couple of rich middle-class millennials going, oh my God, I'm entitled to, my boss should listen to me. At the age of 23, I should be the boss. Oh my God, you didn't listen to me? That's it. You're sexist, racist, whatever. I'll make up charges because I should have been in charge because mommy and daddy told me. Okay, yeah. So you've really done more harm to the movement than you could possibly imagine. So don't come here with that nonsense. We're fighting for actual progressives, and we're going to fight 1,000% for guys like Alex Morrison, Shahid Buttar, and the next person smeared by alt-right maniacs who started the smear against me, backed up by so-called leftists, entitled little pricks that did it to Shahid and to others. Don't come here with that crap, okay? Eyes on the prize. The prize is not your career. The prize is not whether you're esteemed enough and respected enough, etc. No, the prize is Medicare for all, Green New Deal, getting money out of politics, $15 minimum wage, college for all. The prize is actually help American citizens because they desperately need the help. This isn't about your goddamn ego. And if you think it is, we want no part of you. We're here to help actual progressives.
All right, one more story for you guys. That felt good. I've been suppressing that rage for a long time. So I feel calm now. Let's talk about COVID because we have an update on Redfield. So CDC Director Robert Redfield was overheard making some comments about the newest member of the coronavirus task team, and that's Scott Atlas. Scott Atlas is not an expert on, transferable diseases, transmittable diseases, I should say, and has actually been incredibly damaging in promoting the idea of utilizing herd immunity, which would mean possibly millions of Americans could die. And so Redfield was overheard saying about Atlas, everything he says is false. Redfield acknowledged after the flight from Atlanta to Washington that he was speaking about Atlas, so he doesn't deny it. A neuroradiologist with no background in infectious diseases or public health, Atlas was brought on to the White House task force in August. And Atlas responded by saying this, everything I've said is directly from the data and the science, but that's not true. We all know that's not true because he has not been a proponent of wearing masks or of social distancing. Atlas has also misleadingly called into question the efficacy of masks and social distancing, has echoed Trump's call for reopening schools, and perhaps most controversially, has supported the purposeful contraction of the virus by young people to create so-called herd immunity. So far, just to give you an idea of how disastrous herd immunity really would be, about 10% of Americans have contracted coronavirus, and as a result, more than 200,000 have died. In order to get to the point of herd immunity, you need to have 65 to 70% of Americans contract the virus. There's also some evidence indicating that immunity might wane after a while. So it's not like you become immune and that's it. You're permanently immune from the virus. So there's still a big question mark in regard to that issue as well. But if 200,000 people have died with 10% of the population already testing positive for coronavirus, imagine what the number would be like if we're at 65 to 70% of Americans contracting the virus. Public health experts warn that the viability of herd immunity against coronavirus without a vaccine is unknown, given uncertainty about levels and duration of immunity in individual cases. They also say that achieving herd immunity would involve millions of infections and unknown thousands of cases of serious illness and death. But as I mentioned, there are some estimates indicating that it could be as bad as millions of Americans suffering death as a result of this herd immunity suggestion, because think about all these Americans who do have some pretty serious pre-existing conditions, even if they're not elderly. Things like if you're a smoker, if you're obese, if you have diabetes, that makes you much more vulnerable to coronavirus. And we do not have a healthcare system that would be able to bear the weight of so many coronavirus patients coming in at once. So it would be disastrous on a number of fronts, and that's probably what has Dr. Redfield so frustrated.
So, first of all, it might not take 65, 70% of the country getting it to get herd immunity in this particular case, because some folks have T cell immunity to it. In fact, it might be a very large percentage. But nonetheless, in order to get to herd immunity, it is indisputable that it's by definition, more people would have to get the coronavirus, and hence, way more people will die. And this is not in dispute because it already played out in Europe, where Sweden tried herd immunity, and a lot more people died compared to their neighbors, Nordic neighbors that are very similar in demographics, very similar in every way, except they immediately went to testing, tracing, and mass. Sweden didn't, and it cost them thousands of lives. Now, in our case, we're a much larger country, so it's cost us a lot more than that. It's cost us over 200,000 lives and running. So I want to show you a graph of what coronavirus cases looks like in the US. And then I also want to show you Europe. So in this case, the red line is the US and the blue line is Europe. So for a long time, Europe looked like it had actually really taken care of coronavirus. Unfortunately, it has resurged there, as you can tell at the end. That's really disappointing. Having said that, the US never went down. It only plateaued, then went even more up, and now it was about to plateau. And you see at the very end there, it's going back up. Because why? Places like Florida are now reopening bars, indoor dining at restaurants, etc. They're like, wait, is Europe going to catch us? No way. We're going to kill way more people. Not on Trump's watch. They're not going to catch us. So the space that you're seeing there between the blue line and the red line is basically the price of incompetence. And that price is several 100,000 people. So Europe did the right things, and for a long time it worked, and it saved countless lives. And right now in America, we have all of those dead, and DeSantis is reopening Florida, even though he's had 695,000 cases, which is more than most countries in Florida. The positivity rate, you can reopen. And that's part of why Europe is going back up now, because they reopened, but then they realized, oops, apparently it was still too early. So they're going back to taking precautions, except we in America never take precautions. So now we're going to surge past them again. And you can reopen if your positivity rate falls to 5%. It's a long story about what exactly that means. You want to know what it is in Florida, though? It's 13.38%. It's about triple what the rate should be if you want to reopen. But DeSantis is going, yeah, the election's around the corner, and my daddy, Donald Trump, told me to reopen no matter what. So I don't care that the positivity rate is way more than it should be to reopen. Everybody back into the hospitals, and we're going to kill a lot more people for the sake of politics. It's the sickest thing I've ever seen.
It really is. And my advice to people is, you know what you need to do to stay safe, right? So do it. Wear a mask, social distance, and just don't take the advice of the federal government, because they're not serious people who have your best interests in mind. If you choose to follow the advice of people like Scott Atlas, Donald Trump, Ron DeSantis, okay. I mean, like I've said on the show before, I'm at a point where I'm not going to lose sleep over what people decide to do. The evidence is out there. The knowledge is out there. You either follow the evidence, the science, and keep yourself safe, or you take your life in your own hands. You risk your life, your family members' lives. Do you, boo? But these people are thinking about their reelection. They're thinking about political ramifications. They're thinking about the economy and their stock portfolios. They are not thinking about you, your health, or your family's health. And that's the country we live in. We're a failed state.
Yeah, that's a great way of putting it. A failed state. By the way, we have more cases and more deaths than any country in the world. So we're literally worse than any third world country in how we handle the coronavirus. They've destroyed America. And so look, guys, last thing is, nobody likes the current situation. It turns out, and nobody's going to be surprised by this, including the right wing, apparently the only hobby I have is going to restaurants. It's the only thing I do apparently for fun. And now I can't do that. And I hate it. And I don't love wearing a mask. And And there's 1,000 things that bother me about coronavirus, and I want to go to a movie. I do. So it's not like we're not frustrated. We're also frustrated. But we got to keep our families safe. So all we're asking is, and this really does minimizes your risk greatly. Wear the mask, socially distance, and you're mostly covered. It's not too much to ask for, but for political reasons, and in the case of Donald Trump, literally because of his vanity, we've lost all of those people. And unfortunately, it looks like we're now going to lose a lot more.
All right. That's what we have for you. Ricky on Twitch can you lift that? Is next. So make sure you check that out. Our Twitch channel is twitch.tv/TYT. It's awesome. Make sure you check that out.
And guys, don't forget, tomorrow, not only a regular show, but the first presidential debate. Me, Anna, and John are going to cover it. Michael Schur is going to be at the debate himself. He's going to report live from there. And oh boy, that's going to be a doozy. So don't watch it you guys are members already, but don't watch it on cable news where they're going to give you nonsense. We'll give you the actual analysis immediately. Please, and spread the word, guys, if you can, to family and friends. That we're the place to watch these major events because we're going to be honest with you in how we cover it. All right. Much love. We'll see you tomorrow.